This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of the Greater London Authority. Please stand by. This is the broadcast from City Hall, the home of
Right, welcome everybody to today's Economy, Culture and Skills Committee meeting, and thank you for joining us today. The committee will begin by examining the potential introduction of an overnight stay levy in London. We will then move to a discussion on the future of the London Stadium, particularly in light of the reduced income from its main tenant, its anchor tenant, West Ham United Football Club. Before we get started, I'd just like to remind everyone to please make sure that your mobile phones are on silent, and I'd also ask that members and guests position their electronic devices away from their microphones. If you do need to adjust your microphone, please move it from the base. Members of the public are encouraged to follow us on London Assembly on various social media platforms and to use the hashtag #AssemblyEconomy for this committee's meeting. Now I have a few items of business to cover first. If I can ask our committee clerk, Sal Fazal, to confirm any apologies for today's meeting.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies for absence have been received from Assembly Member Desai.
Thank you very much. And move on to declarations of interest. Can I ask the committee to note the recommendations set out in item 2 and ask if members have any other interests to declare? No West Ham fans? No? OK. And we've got minutes of the last meeting. Can I ask the committee to confirm minutes of the meetings held on the 2nd of June and 24th of June to be signed by myself as correct records? Yep. Thank you very much. And can I ask the committee to note the completed and ongoing actions arising from the previous meetings and the additional correspondence received and sent? Thank you very much. Can I ask the committee to note the response from the Mayor of London to its report, A London for Every Child, Reversing the City's Declining Child Population? Thank you very much, and well done to the previous chair who pulled together that report. And we move on to our substantial item for today on the overnight visitor levy, and I'd like to welcome our guests. We can start with the Deputy Mayor, Howard Dorber, OBE, who's Deputy Mayor for Business Growth, and also introduce Kate Nichols, OBE, who's Chair of UK Hospitality, Matthew Fell, Director of Competitiveness at Business London. They might do with somebody with your role at West Ham, and Anthony Breach, who's Director of Policy and Research at Centre for City. So welcome to our guests. I'll just open up by saying this is an agenda item that was supported by the Oversight Committee that I chaired. We produced a report in terms of the devolution agenda, what that might look like for London, and one of the key factors was around fiscal devolution powers. So there's no point having powers to be able to do things, you don't have the money to be able to do it. And the obvious one that came out from that piece of work was a tourism levy of some sort, which is something that virtually every other competitive city to London already has in place. There was two key recommendations. The first was that government seek to use opportunities within legislation to introduce that, and we're currently going through that at the moment, so seeking to introduce legislation that would allow us the powers to be able to introduce an overnight stay levy. The second one was to engage with stakeholders as to how that levy would be introduced, and obviously stakeholders such as yourselves as businesses, but also in terms of local authorities and so on and so forth. So if I could start with the Deputy Mayor, what's your position on the potential introduction of an overnight stay levy? How do you see the process so far? And at what point do you feel like you'll be engaging with stakeholders in terms of its introduction?
Right, well, thank you very much for having us. And also thank you to the Oversight Committee of the Assembly for the very useful report, which went into quite some depth on this. The timing of today is unfortunate on two counts. One is, and hopefully everybody's not going to be watching their mobile phones for the announcements from Downing Street this afternoon of who's in the cabinet and so on, but it's temptation to do that, but I'm not going to. But secondly, couldn't possibly comment. The second thing is that we actually had hoped that by the time we got to this point, that the government would have responded to the consultation it's carried out on this subject. So we are actually all waiting to see what the government consultation says. And because of that, there's a lot of things that we would have otherwise wanted to go into that were, a lot of things we're going to have to say, you have to wait and see. Because that government consultation could take decisions on, for example, whether they favour a flat rate or a percentage rate. I mean, it could come back and say we've decided not to do it. I don't think that's going to happen, but it could. Flat rate versus percentage rate, whether they're going to have the set rate for the same rate for the whole country, whether there's going to be, national limits on, for example, where you levy it, what exceptions there are, what you spend the money on. So there's a lot of stuff in there in terms of how this might be taken forward that we'll have to wait and see. However, the Mayor's made it clear we welcome the principle. You're absolutely right. London's the biggest city in the G7 that doesn't have a levy like this. It's been successfully introduced in many of our competitor cities around the world. And the Mayor said when the government announced this last year that it could be a very good source of income to support growth in the sector, particularly, and growth more widely in London. So our starting point is that we think it could be a very good idea. If between here and actually a levy coming in, you've got the government's consultation, which we now think will be published later this year, probably in early autumn. The legislation has to go through. After the legislation, or potentially simultaneously with it, depending on how it's structured, the Mayor would have to take a decision on whether to do it or not. We would then do our own consultation. So there's quite a lot of consultation to come and discussion to come before any levy would be implemented. And at the moment, the timetable would be that levy would actually not come into force until the end of 2028. There's actually been a discussion among the other mayoral strategic authorities with us, and of course the current Prime Minister was one of those mayoral leaders calling for the government to try and speed that up. because if it comes in 2028, not only is that the other side of the next mayoral election, but it's actually the other side of the European Football Championships, where there's an opportunity to actually, raise significant amounts of money in London. So we're encouraging the government to see if it can be a little bit quicker in that, while maintaining space for genuine consultation with the hospitality sector on how you would implement it, and the best way in doing that having minimal impact on the sector. So that's where we are. So broadly, yes, but there's a lot of hoops to jump through and things to happen before we get there.
Yeah, of course, and this is why we're having today's meeting as well, to make sure that we can put those on the table in terms of those other points to take on into account. Matthew, if I can come to you in terms of your organisation's position and a bit about how you come about with that position.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Look, I think our starting point is actually it's quite hard to envisage a tougher economic climate in which to pitch this proposal into right now, given the backdrop facing the sector. So I think we have got quite a few competitiveness tests for it to clear. And as the Deputy Mayor has just outlined, whilst many cities do have similar levies in place, we don't believe that's a straight apples and apples comparison. If you look at the cost base and the level of taxes that fall on those respective competitor cities for the visitor economy. So that, I think, is our sort of opening standpoint. So we would say very much have that competitive, relative competitive position in mind when you are deciding if and when to proceed with the levy. If it clears those two hurdles, I think there are then three really important priorities to bear in mind in shaping the design of any levy. They would be, firstly, to make sure that any proceeds from it are 100% used to support growth. So they're designed to promote London and attracting tourists to London. That's a very square focus solely on that as a growth objective. Second, that then the levy collectors have a meaningful say over how those funds are used and deployed over time, so they view it as genuinely value added. And then thirdly, that simplicity is the watchword that flows through the design of any levy, which in our view, and I suspect we'll get into in the conversation, would include broad application with minimal exemptions, a flat rate approach, the same consistent approach used across locations, and single points of collection and appeal. So simplicity flowing through the whole design of a system. That's us.
Thank you. Yeah, we'll absolutely get into the detail of that. Kate.
Well, thank you very much for having me here today. I think if Howard was broadly yes, I'm definitely broadly no. I think it's supporting what Matthew said. It's the wrong tax at the wrong time. We fully support meaningful fiscal devolution. We support the mechanisms to allow businesses and local residents, local communities, local visitors to be able to pay their way and to support local spending and investment, and fully support raising funds with a public-private partnership to support local investment. But a tax on visitors is disproportionate, and it's the wrong time to be doing it and introducing it. We don't believe the additional tax is the right way to generate that investment and to get it moving forward in a meaningful way. A better way is to work in partnership, as we did immediately post-COVID, when we had a joint fund from central government, local government, the mayor and business to be able to market London and promote growth. And for every £1 that was spent on marketing and driving growth, it generated £32 of investment into the London economy, supporting and sustaining jobs. So additional tax on visitors, as Matthew said, there is a competitiveness test to go through. Every single time that you put a tax on a business, it gets passed through to the customer on price. That impacts the customers who are coming to stay in London, business visitors, leisure visitors, domestic stay, those visiting family and friends, as well as international tourists. It's not just an international tourism tax that we're putting here, it hits everybody. And that in turn impacts on the cost of living. The sector as a whole over the last 2 years has had an extra £4 billion worth of tax imposed upon it. And that means that we are 113th out of 119 countries globally in the competitiveness of our visitor economy product. And this will just make it worse. So you do have to see an additional tax. When people talk about how small it is, you do have to see it in the context of everything else that is going on. And when we look at the tests that are determined should this be introduced, we need to do a full cost-benefit analysis to look at the costs. This is income, but it's not without costs to GDP, to lost revenue, to lost growth and to lost jobs. The Oxford Economics research that we carried out suggested that nationally it could cost 28,000 jobs, £2 billion hit to GDP and 726,000 fewer visits. Both domestic and international tourists, similar kind of numbers. So it would see a drop. And when we look at competitor cities, yes, we might be an outlier in not having a tourism tax, but we are an outlier in having the highest tax levels of any visitor economy product in the OECD and the G20, both in terms of higher VAT, but also higher business taxes, employment taxes and property taxes. If the government does decide to proceed nevertheless, then our priority is to ensure it's simple, that we don't have any further additional administrative complexities and costs to the businesses collecting it, that it's a national framework for the structure of it so that it's consistent and proportionate. And as Matthew said, those proceeds have to go at generating growth, has to be focused on driving the best return for London in terms of visitor numbers coming to the capital, staying in the capital and maximising the spend when they are here.
Thank you very much, Kate. Before I come to you, Anthony, just to extend a warm welcome to students of Stafford House International who are here in the public gallery today. So a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks for joining us. We're just talking about the overnight stay levy, which is something the government is currently considering in terms of implementing nationwide and the impact potentially on London specifically. So, Anthony, over to yourself.
Great. Thank you, Chair. It's a pleasure to be here in front of the committee. Apologies for my delayed arrival. So at Centre for Cities, we are big advocates of the mayors having the power to introduce an overnight visitor levy. This is largely because we are wider advocates for devolution to cities and to places, and for us, fiscal devolution is one of the most important aspects of the devolution agenda. If you look across G7 countries, we are by far the most centralised fiscally. Only about 5% of our tax take is collected at the local level, compared to about 11% in Italy, 15% in France, and 25% or so in Japan. And this has consequences for both local economy and for the national economy, insofar as cities and local authorities up and down the country have very little incentive to grow their tax base to fund local public services. The way our local finance system works is if you build more houses, if you build more commercial space, if you increase wages, if you get more visitors into your local economy, that doesn't actually translate into more resource for public services for people in your community. So where we see the overnight visitor levy as being as an important tool is, as previously mentioned, it's very common in other G7 and OECD countries for cities, particularly big cities, to have this kind of revenue-raising tool that's then used to fund investment, growth and services at the local level. But thinking about it almost as kind of the first arrow out of the quiver in terms of fiscal devolution, if we can prove the principle that places should have control over their own tax base, can be trusted to have autonomy over their tax base, and then use the funds for that responsibly, that helps make the case for fiscal autonomy more broadly for London, whether that's going further on business rates, whether that's income tax sharing, whether that's corporation tax sharing. It's quite difficult to see how we can move forward on the wider fiscal devolution agenda unless we can first prove the principle with a very limited tax such as the overnight visitor levy. In terms of the details, we, again, repeating a lot of what the rest of the panel has said, we do support a kind of a broad, simple visitor levy as by far being the least harmful for economic growth within cities. But where we recommend kind of government policy and local policy think about actually designing a levy is moving towards a percentage rate system rather than a flat rate system. we see flat rate systems tend to be more regressive than percentage rate systems abroad. And actually, even though the flat rate system on the surface seems to be simple, actually that regressive nature often introduces more complexity by the back door for any visitor levy.
Thank you very much. I'll move over to Assemblymember Bukhari.
Thank you. So you were talking, Howard, Deputy Mayor, about the new Prime Minister that we have today. And we've had a few recently, haven't we? Now, as we've had a few, and there's been a bit of a changeover with the government, there were promises made in the about funding that it would not be reduced if the Mayor was able to implement the overnight visitor levy. Now, with the new Prime Minister, what assurances are you getting that that commitment will stay the same? Are you going to make sure that that commitment stays the same?
We haven't had, I don't believe that I can report anyway, a specific conversation about OVL in terms of the new government. What we certainly have seen in repeated speeches is a commitment to further devolution, including to London. And we could get sidetracked, obviously, into talking about what the new government's going to do. And, we'll have to wait and see, and we may find out very quickly. But one of the things that Andy Burnham has said very clearly is that London can feel just as far away from Whitehall as the other mayoral areas of the UK. And the point that Anthony just made, we are an extraordinarily centralised country compared with most of our competitors, and it's not about competition; it's about the right way to organise public services. Zohran Mamdani in New York has control of 50% of the taxation in the city. He can create low tax zones. He can go and set up tax incremental financing. He can borrow, but he also has a huge property portfolio and all sorts of other things that we don't have. So when we're looking at how we can compete with New York, where we're competing directly on things like tourism, on attracting conventions to the city and so on, he's got all sorts of revenues and resources that we don't have, and the powers to implement stuff. And often the powers are more valuable than the actual money, because if you can borrow against, for example, future taxation, the actual amount of taxation isn't anymore, but your ability to do something with it is. So what the new Prime Minister has promised is a radical devolution settlement. So we are hopeful that he will stick to his word and deliver a meaningful devolution on this, but also on some other things too. So watch this space. But we're pretty hopeful actually that he's coming in. He was it was only 2 months ago. He was actually a mayor of a strategic authority himself. So and he's been making this case for the last 10 years. So
you're hopeful, the fact that he has been a mayor of a city, he'll get where we are coming from in terms of for supporting a levy.
Yeah, and something I'm sure we'll come back to as decisions get taken and announced. But there are whole areas where we think without increasing the expenditure, in terms of public expenditure, where things could be much better organised from a London level because of our granular, close connections with, for example, the business community, with groups like Kate's hospitality sector, with our colleges, with our universities, that is much better done on a roll your sleeves up, get around the table, do it in London way than it is a sort of top-down way from Whitehall. And that's certainly been our experience in a lot of the sectors where we have had devolved responsibility, that the change to doing it at a London-based level has been to deliver a more effective service and being able to do things you wouldn't be able to do otherwise. So, in a nutshell, very hopeful, think it's the right direction, and I guess we'll have to watch this space and see that they do what they're promising to do.
Great, thank you.
Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning to you all. Before I start, I don't share the Deputy Mayor's enthusiasm for getting people around the table, because the biggest thing that almost all London businesses called for was the reversal in the NI. And we didn't hear the Mayor championing that position around reversing that, be you in hospitality, education, whatever. That has hammered you, and the Mayor never led on that conversation. So the idea that devolving the powers to the Mayor means we'll get a much more muscular Mayor for London, I'm a little bit sceptical about. But anyway, that brings me on to Kate. Good morning, Kate. How are you? What impact could the overnight visitor levy have on London's visitor economy, the hospitality sector and its competitiveness? Because everybody's talking about this tax as if it's going to be paying neutral, and there's a lot of international comparisons going on, but they're performing from a much lower tax base. And to my mind, there's two things that make the London offer. One is the cost and one is the culture. Now, the culture's died in. The place is 1,500 years old. We've got royalty here, all kinds of stuff. But that is only relevant if people can afford it. So are we tipping too far to making London expensive?
I think we're already past that tipping point. Right. As I said, if you take an international competitive set, we're 113th out of 119. So we are very expensive, and that comes up in every single survey that is done with international inbound tourists. It's not just our inbound tourists, it's also about our balance of trade with our domestic visitors. They think it's much cheaper to get on a plane and fly to Barcelona, to fly to Amsterdam, to fly to Venice, New York even, rather than come to London for a trip, because London is seen as being very expensive. So we are in danger of pricing ourselves out of the market and making ourselves even more expensive. We, as businesses, the cost of living and the price to the consumer is made up of what it costs to do business. We have the second highest energy costs in the world. We have the third highest living wage in the world. We have the second highest property costs in the OECD with our business rates. All of these flow through to how much we charge our customers, and we have the highest rate of VAT as well. So when we look at the price, if you take as an international comparison New York, I recently went and stayed in New York on a trade visit for the UK. The city tax, the sales tax, the tourism tax, the visitor tax was less than the rate of VAT in the UK. And that impacts on our competitiveness. If we're adding in international visitors, they also have to pay for visa costs to come to the UK. So we do have to think carefully. It's not a cost-neutral solution. And as we've seen where it's been introduced on a voluntary basis in Liverpool and Manchester and Edinburgh, it has seen a diversion of trade and business, particularly from groups and particularly from businesses who are looking to bring large conferences to those cities. They are looking elsewhere.
Okay. Absolutely. Go ahead, Matthew.
Thank you. Just to add a little bit on that, I would say, just firstly, if you put yourselves in the shoes of the international visitor, typically the two big upfront costs that you're faced with are airfares and the accommodation, hotel costs. And to reinforce Kate's point, airfares obviously have very high rates of air passenger duty levied on them, and similarly for hotels, as we've talked about, the higher rates of VAT. So I think that's on the sort of cost side in the UK. The other piece I'd really like to make when we're talking about the competitive position is to think about this in the round, and if and when it is to go ahead, we think it is a very good opportunity to look at other issues that impact on the sector quite significantly, particularly, for example, the case for reintroducing VAT-free shopping for international tourists, and also whether we take the opportunity to have a further look at some of the exemptions around Sunday trading rules in some of the peak visitor areas, for example, around the West End, Knightsbridge and so on. So I think the main point I was keen to lend with there is think about the basket of issues that shape the agenda for how competitive London's tourism offer is, and there's an opportunity here, rather than just doing this in isolation, to look at some of those other measures as well to see the total package.
So, Deputy Mayor, do you think that the introduction of this tax will have a shock effect on our competitiveness?
Well, we don't think that. And actually, studies from across Europe, from where taxes have been introduced, have shown that it's had almost no impact on demand. And in fact, recently in the Balearic Islands, where they're actively trying to dissuade tourism, they recently proposed a very high rate and did a study on it. And the study showed that they didn't think that was going to deter tourism. That was meant to be a punitive rate. So there are some. Obviously, Kate's got a study that she's done with Oxford Research. There are other studies out there from where it has actually been introduced in a city and what's happened over time. So we don't think it'll have that much of a detrimental impact. However, part of the process of introducing such a levy would include an economic impact assessment. So we would absolutely do that in the run-up to implementing any tax, because it's very important for us to know For example, there are different ways to structure it where you can have certain exemptions, where you levy it, for example, on per room per night, per person per night. There are examples where in other countries they've introduced, banding. So, a 2-star or a 3-star hotel will pay less than a 5-star hotel. We actually agree with the principle that Kate was setting out, that if it happens, it should be as simple to collect as possible. The burden on the organisation, the burden on the hospitality sector should be as low as possible, because this is obviously a levy on the visitors, not on the businesses. So and we absolutely agree with a lot of things Kate said. In fact, we probably only disagree on the principle of whether we do it or not, to be honest.
Fundamental, I'd argue.
But we absolutely agree with the points raised about the costs that the industry's facing, and we want to, if this is going to happen, we want to have as minimal impact on the industry itself as possible. So we actually we broadly believe that it won't have the detrimental impact that that Kate's suggesting, and although at times have been very tough for the sector, in the last year we've put on 2,300 additional hotel rooms in central London, 15 new major openings of hotels. We're now at something like 240 rooms, if you include the Airbnb and the non-sort of hotel sector across the city. Our overseas visitor numbers are back up to now just beyond pre-COVID levels, and we have an ambitious plan to raise them further. We've been named as the TripAdvisor #1 tourist destination in the world.
Sorry to cut across you.
So we're doing okay.
But again, the #1 on TripAdvisor is London. It's not the rules that the mayor or the government imposes. It's the 1,500 years of London and the 10 billion people who live here who make it work. So I don't want to hear too much about that. But what I do want to hear about, basic economics would suggest if you increase price, you lower demand. You are comparing us internationally because it suits you for everybody. We are not the Balearic Islands. Our visitor numbers are far in advance of theirs, and of course we have a much bigger staycation element of that. There is Londoners who can't afford to come into London. There's people who live just beyond in Essex who'd love a night out in London. So you're not comparing apples and apples. So I think if you're going to do this economic impact assessment, I would really like to see the methodology, because I'm a little bit dubious on that. And I tell you why, Deputy Mayor, because the political enthusiasm for this, because Labour love a high tax environment. We've had many report about how Labour MPs are looking for more people to tax. So we would want to see what the methodology was behind this to make sure we're getting a clear look at this, because we are not the Balearic Islands. There is no comparison there as far as I can see.
Just to come back on that, we will absolutely set out an economic impact assessment on this. We'll set out how we're going to do it. What I would also say is that if you wanted now to book a hotel room in London, and you pick, let's say, a double room at the Hilton Park Lane, the actual price you pay for that room, if you book it right now today from this room, will vary by up to 20% based on what website you use, what card you're using, where you're booking from, because they operate different prices for different markets, and actually a small, modest percentage rate we don't think will have much impact on those people's decision to take that room in London or not, because it's already a very dynamic market which varies by quite a lot, in even day to day in terms of what you pay.
But that dynamism is a fact. But wherever you book your fee, however much you're going to pay, an imposition of a tax will make it that much more expensive. That's a fact. That the tax is much more sticky than the dynamism of the market. But that's that. Let me move on, because we could be here all day. What does the evidence from other cities show about the effect of visitor levy on numbers and length of stay? I suppose we are all in favour of VAT-free shopping for foreign visitors. So we know that changes in price and stuff have an effect on different shoppers. But who are we most worried? Bearing in mind a large part of London's visitor economy are British people. They're not. They're coming from around about the cost of living in this country. The high tax environment the government has built is very relevant to them. Anthony, please answer that if you're able.
Yes, sure thing. Thank you, Lord Bailey. So I think the kind of high-level question of the fact that we have relatively high headline rates for things like VAT does seem to be borne out by the international evidence. I think will be a material factor in, if a visitor levy is introduced, what the rate of that visitor levy is. But the kind of key economic concept, I think, for the impact of any introduction of a levy is not the headline rate itself, but the elasticity of the tax. So how responsive, how price sensitive are visitors to any increase in price that arises. What seems to be the case for international evidence is that visitors in general are relatively price inelastic, so they're not that price sensitive. And it seems in particular business visitors are extremely price inelastic compared to other types of visitor. But there's some degree of evidence kind of supporting that point. There's less on the elasticity of tax specifically as it pertains to visitor levies, where we have found some research which does compare British, I think French and Italian destinations in terms of their tax elasticity, is it seems, particularly compared to London, that a 1% increase in the visitor levy in Milan results in a 0.016% decrease in visitors to Milan. For Paris, a similar 1% increase in the visitor levy results in a 0.0068 decrease in visitors to Paris. So these are essentially statistically insignificant effects on the amount of visitors who arrive in these cities as a result of the levy. That may be because the levies are currently very small. That might be because of the way that they are structured, that they're collected after the visitor kind of arrives at the hotel to partake in their booking. They have no other choice but to pay the levy. But broadly, it seems that certainly for the major international destinations that have a compelling international offer for both tourists and also for businesses, there doesn't seem internationally to be much of an effect of certainly modest visitor levies of 5% or less.
Okay. Kate, just before you answer, add to that my concern about British visitors, London visitors. You know, I was born and raised in this city. The idea that you can't come from Romford to bring your kids into the centre anymore because it's so expensive is pretty horrific. So add that effect. Is there an effect, or am I just emotional?
No, there is undoubtedly an effect. You know, we repeatedly get it. When you look at the Visit Britain stats on inbound visitors, the price of accommodation is the single biggest deterrent that we have in attracting people to come and stay for sport, for music, for entertainment, for food and drink tourism, for coming over. The cost of our accommodation comes up time and time again. London is an expensive city. That also impacts when we look at the inbound statistics for domestic tourism as well. Coming into London, it's expensive, so people look at other destinations and areas that they want to go to. Anything that makes it more expensive, it puts up the cost of doing business, will pass on to the customer in terms of price. It's also worth noting in this respect that this is framed as a levy, not a tax. So this is not paid by the customers, this is paid by the businesses. If a customer refuses to pay it at the reception desk, it's the business that still has to pay, that has to pass that on. And at the moment, the proposal is that it's going to have VAT on top of that. So effectively, we are going to be looking, if we go with the government's proposal of 5% of room rate, we are looking at an effective sales tax on our accommodation of 27%, because it's VAT on top of VAT. So there is going to be a large chunk that goes to the Exchequer. That needs to be ring-fenced if that's the case, as well as what gets passed to London. But that's the proposal at the moment. That's not insignificant sums of money. And if you are coming into London with the kind of prices that we've got for our accommodation, because of our business rates, because of our labour costs, because of our energy costs, these businesses are operating on net profit margins. They are not making a profit out of this. A third of hospitality businesses are operating at or below break even. We want to keep prices low. There is no way that an additional tax is not going to get passed on to the customer in terms of price. We simply can't afford to do that. So it's inevitable that it will make London less competitive. And we've heard about international comparisons and the price elasticity of demand. Italy, France, Spain, their VAT rate is 10%. Germany has just dropped theirs to 7%, and Ireland has just dropped theirs at 9%. So we have very real competitive situations where we can see what happens when the sales tax that is paid by a consumer at the end of the day goes differently. One is cut to boost jobs, growth and investment in hospitality because they value tourism as an economic growth lever. And let's not forget, it is the second growth lever in the Mayor's economic growth plan. The visitor economy, the experience economy drives good quality jobs across the whole of London, accessible jobs. These are jobs that are at risk if we deter visitors. And while it might be something that seems a small amount of money, that is an amount of money if you've come in to stay from Romford overnight and you might well have afforded your accommodation and you might be doing something, eating and drinking out with the family and friends. When you come to the end of your stay and you're faced with an additional 5% tax or £2 per person per night, that is money that's not going to the taxi driver, it's not going to the coffee shop, it's not going to the ice cream, because you've got much less money in your pocket at the end of your stay, so you're not going to be able to spend in the wider economy.
Thank you, Chair. It's astonishing that we see a tax as a growth lever. I'm a bit confused by that, but there you go.
All right, I'll listen into the rest of the conversation then. Alex Wilson.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panel. So I'm conscious that much of the rest of the questions that we're going to be discussing are looking at the kind of implementation and so on of this, notwithstanding the fact that there's still quite a lot to be decided by central government and so on. But I just want to take this opportunity to, as with Assembly Member Bailey, Lord Bailey, I'm really not sold on the principle to begin with, because it seems to me like it's good old-fashioned socialism. You see something that's vaguely moving, and what do? You want to tax it, and it's a scheme that I think has been dreamt up by people who don't really understand how much more difficult it is to generate value, particularly in these very, very difficult circumstances, than it is to spend it. I was going to ask Kate if you could, but you've just done it, but I was going to ask you to clarify exactly what the difference in VAT rates was with these competitor cities. Thank you for confirming that in every one of those major competitors, they're paying less, or at the most, half the rate of VAT that we're expecting our hospitality businesses to pay, and that's on top of, as you've mentioned, the property cost, business rates.
Assembly Member Wilson, what's your question?
Yes, well, my question is, how can anyone really think that this is the right time to be imposing yet another tax and a bureaucratic burden of having to process it, while we're already facing, in this particular sector, what feels like death by 1,000 cuts?
Is that for me? I think we've touched before on economic impact assessment. We really support what the Deputy Mayor has just said about making sure we've got a robust economic impact assessment. We would go one stage further. We feel that if the government is going to introduce this and they are going to bring forward legislation to do that, they should make sure that it's written into statute that has to happen before a consultation is started. You need to make sure we've got a robust prospectus so that we have an informed understanding of the costs of this, as well as the revenue-generating powers and opportunities that exist, and where you might see downturns for people who refuse to pay, go elsewhere, or what would happen to the other revenues. I think it's also important to look at what is already funded and make sure that we don't see any dilution of that. We've already seen a halving of Visit Britain's overseas marketing budget for tourism generation across the capital and across the country as a whole. So we need to make sure that we are not seeing this being displaced or used as an excuse for reducing the amount that is spent on tourism and tourism infrastructure nationally as well as locally. But yes, having that written into legislation, a good economic impact assessment, good consultation requirements with affected businesses and with local visitor economy partnerships. We are fortunate in London that we have a very good tourism advisory board that has been used with London and Partners, which I've chaired for a number of years previously. But just leave you with one thing. We are not back to pre-COVID levels of tourism value and footfall. That's since 2019, we have not recovered. Before we damage a vital economic industry, our second largest services export earner, and what was the fastest growing one, we need to do a really detailed economic impact assessment. The Treasury has said that because it's a tax, you don't have to do an economic impact assessment nationally. Let's make sure that that is done as we go through the legislation and as that is introduced and there's a requirement at a local level.
Yeah, just two practical suggestions, if I may, to reinforce some of what Kate was saying there. One is, as well as the impact assessment, we think it'd be very helpful to set out a baseline of current performance against what the levy is designed to improve, so that we can see that it is genuinely additive over time. So you see the sort of baseline starting point. And then the second suggestion is that if it comes into being, that we build in a process of sort of periodic review a certain number of years, so that then the levy collectors can have an opportunity to say, is this having and delivering the benefits that it was designed to do? Do you still favour or not favour its continuation? So it's a way of firstly establishing the baseline, and then secondly just holding feet to fire to say, is this working as intended?
Just to say that we've got a lot of sympathy for a lot of what Kate's saying. We do have a lot of central government taxation. We've got a lot of central government taxation in the city generally, and where we create value as a city, quite often that value is sort of disproportionately captured by central government. We certainly don't. We certainly understand our responsibility as a capital city, that we are an engine of economic growth. And we generate £43 billion of extra tax in London compared to what's spent in London. And we don't begrudge the rest of the country that. That's part of what it is to be a capital city. But that ability to capture a little bit of the growth in London for use then to invest in growth in London, which this represents one opportunity to do so, is very important in the context of fiscal evolution. I'd say two things. The Mayor has, in fact, been very supportive of reforms to the business rate system. We do think it disproportionately affects some businesses rather than others, particularly in central London, and also has called for the government to extend its support for things like pubs to other parts of the hospitality sector, because we talk to Kate and her members, and we know that it's difficult there. The reason why, despite that context, we still think that the levy, and particularly what we then spend the money from the levy on, is still worth looking at, going through the assessment, and on principle we would intend to take forward, is that this would be used to invest in those industries and in growth in the city. We get no money from national government to support tourism in London. Zero. New York the Mayor has a budget in New York. The state has a budget in New York. In fact, it's the state of New York that owns the I Heart New York logo. It's the state of New York who are doing adverts on our buses and tubes. And thank you very much for the money, State of New York, for the tube adverts. That's very kind to advertise here. But we can't do those adverts. We have no budget to do that sort of advertising in other overseas markets. We have a very effective group in London and Partners now, the Experience Economy group that incorporates all of the tourist attractions in the hospitality sector, and we've got some budget there in London and Partners. But compared to some other places around the world, it's tiny. So being able to have not just a resource, but a resource that we know is going to be there year on year, that we can then use to invest in some of these things, will we think make a significant difference. And our start point is obviously going to be that we want the sector to be better off at the end of this because of the investment that's been made in driving additional growth in the sector. And that's part of what the economic impact assessment will be, that there's a positive here. The money is not going to disappear. It's going to be actually invested in the things that support the sector to grow.
Okay, I'm going to have to move on.
Cool. Just very quickly, one very quick
Very quickly.
Okay. So, in your introduction, you mentioned the Oxford economics research that suggested that this could cost, was it 26,000 jobs? Perhaps could you just remind us how many jobs have been lost in the hospitality sector since Rachel Reeve's first budget?
We have, well, it's a difficult one. We don't have good central data, but 120,000 jobs in hospitality. 2/3 of the jobs lost across the economy in the last 18 months have been in the hospitality and tourism sector.
I think that says everything about how you can't tax your way to growth. Thank you.
Assembly Member Georgiou.
Thank you. Look, the fact that this is called an overnight visitor levy is what typically communists do. They know it's unpopular. They just call it what it is, a tourist tax. And just to save a bit of time, here's what's going to happen the rest of this meeting. Those on the centre right are going to say this is awful. Those on the centre left, the I Heart New York, the I Heart Sadiq Khan team will say this is all wonderful. So let's just cut through the nonsense. And Kate, for what it's worth, I entirely empathise with where you say I hate tax in general. I hate new taxes. But equally, and I hate this tax, by the way, but I'm playing devil's advocate here as someone on the right. So I'll challenge you, and then I'll come to Howard, who thinks that the only way you get more tourists is by taxing everyone to death, which they do anyway. But Kate, in all sincerity, let's say we slap on a £2 charge. I've just been abroad recently when I went last summer holidays to Crete, and it was a €10 charge. I really objected to it because it came right at the end. They were like, all of a sudden, here we go, Mr. Tourist has come along, €10 a night, we're going to charge you. I came back from a trip in Eastern Europe not too long ago over the weekend, and it was €2 a night. Actually, it was €2 for the whole stay. So I come to the point where I can't. I think on this debate, I can't believe that we are likely to lose 26,000 jobs because we're saying we're going to stick a £2 charge per night. So that's where I'm coming from. For what it's worth, playing devil's advocate, I wholeheartedly agree with you. I don't want it. But looking at those figures, I can't quite believe it.
Well, those figures are based on what the government has said in its consultation, which was that it wouldn't be a £2 or a £1 per person per night, per room per night. It was a percentage of room rate, which is quite significant. And if you've got 5% of the room rate for London, with VAT on top of that as a charge, so your room rate, your VAT on the room rate, your 5% as a visitor levy, and your VAT on top of the visitor levy, that's 27% sales tax that you're effectively paying at the end of it. So that has a much more significant impact. That is not £1 to £2 per night. And yes, we've all been on holiday when we're going abroad, and we face that. We don't like it. Does it make a difference when we make a decision? It might do if there's a city nearby, Paris, where the VAT rate is half, that you might choose to go there. And that's what we're really dealing with in London, is people are making decisions. And it's not just about, do you come to London or do you not? It's, do you come to London for 1 night or 5 nights? And a visitor who comes and stays overnight is 20 times more beneficial to the economy if they stay overnight than if they come as a day tripper. An international visitor staying overnight is 80 times more impactful on the economic benefit they bring to London. We should be working to ensure that we're attracting those visitors that are going to come and trying to get them to stay longer, to nudge them from coming for 3 nights to 5 nights, 5 nights to 7 nights, coming to London and going to see the rest of the UK, keeping the economic benefit in the UK, rather than deterring them or making them go elsewhere. So that was the basis of that assessment by Oxford Economics, was that it was 5% of room rate. We took the average amount that was done, and they estimated that you would have a £2 billion hit to GDP, 726,000 fewer visits from abroad, 680 fewer visits from domestic, and therefore you would see a reduction in job numbers.
So when you say it like that, it convinces me even more why your position is absolutely accurate. But the man to your right will say, well, we've not really heard from government. We know they're going to go ahead from it. The consultation paper probably doesn't reflect all of the options. Now, I guess, Howard, then, because you started this saying nothing's a done deal, we don't know what it's going to be. I mean, Kate's put forward an extremely compelling argument to find, let's say, a middle road where we do have a flat, tiny proportion of a tax as opposed to a percentage, which I think is what Anthony was advocating.
So we're broadly in favour of percentage at rate, and for a whole number of reasons. First of all, it's progressive. It's more progressive to have a percentage rate. So,
but when you say progressive, it just means more tax. Clearly, it's been spelt out why it's not. I know you may disagree with what the principle of what Kate's saying, because her position is we don't want to tax at all. Yeah. But have you not listened to any of that and said, actually, maybe we shouldn't go for a proportional tax and have a flat rate?
No, so we think a percentage tax is a better way to do it for a number of reasons. One is, clearly, if it's a flat rate per person per room, for example, you'd end up in a situation where a couple staying in a 5-star hotel in central London, like the Dorchester, would end up paying less than a family of 4 staying in a Travelodge in Romford, which clearly doesn't make sense. Back to the point about, the cost of living and, the disproportionate burden, because it's going to have more of an impact and a potential deterrent effect on that family staying in relatively modest accommodation than it is on the people who've splashed 1,200 quid on a suite at the Dorchester. So percentage is fairer in terms of reflecting the cost that people are paying for accommodation. And the second thing is that if you set a flat rate, then you're not taking into account, for example, when the sector has a really bad year and has to cut the cost of accommodation to encourage people to come, or when the sector has a really good year and puts up the costs. If you have a situation where with inflation that £2 or £3, you have to come back and review it. And that's one of the reasons why some of the people who've got a flat rate have actually switched to a percentage rate. So Tokyo had a flat rate and it's now switching to a percentage rate because it makes more sense. It also enables you to set a relatively modest rate across the city and raise actually significant amounts of money to reinvest in the sector, which is the point. And Kate herself in her notes, she's right. When we had the post COVID campaign, the cost benefit analysis of investing in the sector is really good. It really does drive behaviour, and that's where at the moment we don't have any funding to do that.
We're coming on to what to do with the money later, Howard. But what you've done to demonstrate to me that it is punitive, and you're going after the same people. Look, if you get some rich Texan American tourist come over staying at the Dorchester, I promise you, even if I wanted a saucy weekend in central London with my wife, you're going to get far more money out of him than you are out of me. We'll go see a theatre, go see a show, and trust me, we're not going to stay at the Dorchester. I'm an assembly member. I'm not an oil tycoon. But that Texan might be a deterrent. 5% on a very expensive hotel bill. They might just say, "We'll stuff that. We'll just, as you say, we'll go to Paris, where we don't have to pay VAT, and I can buy my wife a nice, diamond."
So the next set of questions is specifically around this topic. So I'm going to pause. I'm going to pause there and offer the opportunity for people to take bleach into their eyes over what they just heard.
Sorry, did you want the spicy weekend with me?
I knew that.
I won't say what's been offered already. Assemblymember Ahmed next.
So I wanted to hear the rest of the diamond necklace that he was going to buy his wife, actually, and that would be a commitment made in public. Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, panel. Just getting into this whole issue about percentage versus flat rates. I mean, Deputy Mayor, you have talked about the Hilton. The previous Assembly member talked about the Dorchester, all places that I have no connection or have never been to, by the way. But here are some facts. So, one night at the Four Seasons Hotel in Park Lane cost £3,607. One night at the A to B Hotel in Hanger Lane, Ealing, cost £40. Both of those figures are correct as of the 15th of July. Does it make sense for both these properties to pay the same flat rate? Because if they paid 2%, that would be Park Lane paying £72.14 and Hanger Lane paying 80%. So which levy design would best balance revenue generation and fairness while maintaining London's competitiveness as a tourist destination? I think, actually, Matthew, could you answer first, please?
Yeah, thank you. We were one of the views that using my principle of simplicity that I set out at the start, that is why we were more encouraged to go for a flat rate. What I would say on the debate between a percentage rate and a flat rate is it's one of those views where actually we would advocate a nationally consistent approach, and that would probably be the more important thing as opposed to actually preferring one or the other in actual fact. So I think the worst of all worlds would be if multi-site hotel operators or other accommodation providers had to have a different approach going on, either within different localities dotted across London or more likely across different parts of the UK for those that operate outside of London. So I think our guiding principle on this is around simplicity, which would start with having a national framework, and once you've achieved that, our preference would be to a flat rate, but it's guided by that idea of simplicity.
Thank you. Anthony.
Thank you, Assemblymember. Very good question. I think perhaps maybe the best way to think about answering this is to consider where does a flat rate make sense? And if you consider the qualities that a flat rate has, where it's relatively simple for the accommodation provider to collect and to set, and as you pointed out, where there's not much price difference between different types of accommodation, in areas where there's relatively low variation in the types of accommodation provider is perhaps somewhere of a flat and of a relatively small scale. That's the kind of location where a flat rate might make sense. So you might consider, for instance, the Scottish Highlands, right, or a kind of very marginal tourist destination where it's mostly small B&Bs, it's kind of self-service cottages and similar, where the burdens of collection might be high for kind of family operators, and where there's not really any price distinctions between different types of provider. Obviously, large cities, and especially London, are not like that. As you've highlighted, there are massive price differences and different types of operator working within London's accommodation market. And within that context, I think a percentage rate makes sense for a lot of the reasons in which the Deputy Mayor has set out. I mean, some of the evidence we found, again, looking internationally, is that if you consider Lisbon's £3.47 flat rate, what that means is for accommodation that's below £70 per night, that's more than 5% in terms of the tax rate that they're levying upon people who visit Lisbon. So if we're concerned about the kind of the elasticities, and we're concerned about price being a deterrent, especially to budget travellers, actually a proportionate rate makes more sense in terms of mitigating those cost of living factors. One other kind of international comparison that we've considered is Ontario, where they've had a kind of a visitor levy for many years now. They've got about 414 municipalities across all of Ontario. Of those, only about 87 levy a visitor levy, and of those 87, only one currently levies a flat rate, which is the town of Niagara Falls. That town, Niagara Falls, is actually switching to a proportionate rate later this year because of the issues that they've had with the progressiveness and the lack of kind of economic incentives that comes with a flat rate levy. So moving to that more kind of proportionate system, I think definitely makes sense for London, given the nature of its accommodation industry.
Thank you. And having been to Niagara Falls in the last couple of years, I did have this conversation with people down there, and it is very interesting. Thank you for raising that. Kate?
Thank you. I think you can look at international comparisons for setting a structure, but actually it's more instructive to look at what happens within the United Kingdom where these powers have been enacted, because internationally you have all sorts of distortions about federal government versus national government, different forms of taxes. We have consistency. The only place in the UK that has so far introduced a levy at a percentage rate is Edinburgh. They introduced it at 5%, and they are having to move away from it because it is having a distortive impact, and it is deterring the ability for them to attract conventions and business conferences. Across Wales, again, the discussions that have been had are around keeping it towards a flat rate and moving away from a percentage rate because of the complexity. We are designing a scheme here, or rather the government is designing a scheme here for England, not just for London, and there will be differences in the London market, but we need to make sure that there is a scheme that works across England and across the whole of England, not just across major cities and conurbations. I'm with Matthew. We want a scheme that is nationally consistent, and therefore the one that works best for the whole of England would be one that is a flat rate rather than a percentage. There is always going to be a compromise here. The 5 principles that we've got for how this should be implemented: simplicity, fairness, universality, minimal administration for businesses, and something that's pro-tourism. You're not going to get something that matches all of those. You're not going to get a perfect scheme that is designed. You are going to have to compromise. For us, as business owners, where we are having to apply this on the day when visitors come, and as I said, it's us that pays it, not the visitor, there is the point about minimal administration. If it's a consistent national flat rate, there is no argument, there's no discussion, there's no working out what was paid on the day, which website you went to, any of those kind of complexities with the total bill. It is a flat rate. It minimises the administrative costs to the businesses nationally.
And you earlier, if you can just help me with this, you earlier talked about the fact that London is not at pre-pandemic levels in terms of visitors yet. You listed a whole load of other countries in terms of their, in terms of what they were doing with regard to their levies. Can you just say, I mean, I remember Ireland in that. Are they back to their pre-pandemic levels yet? You might not know that, so it's just for interest.
They are just at or about pre-pandemic levels. I can't reel off the stats for the whole of the European Union, but it tends to be when tourism recovers for periods of time that you are closed or impacted, where you've got a major event, volcanoes, 9/11, COVID, the Straits of Hormuz being closed and wars. It takes twice as long to recover as it does the period of time which tourism is impacted. We were closed for effectively 2 years during COVID, and we've had a series of crises after that. This year in particular was supposed to be the year that we got to pre-COVID levels. People tend to start local and then they travel internationally in long distance, which is why other markets recover more quickly or in different ways. But the UK is disproportionately skewed towards inbound, and we've had a 15% drop-off in international inbound visitor numbers, aircraft numbers, due to what's happened in the Middle East.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor, did you want to add anything more to the issue about flat rate or percentage?
Not really, beyond what I've already said. Apart from we think is a simple way to do it. The industry is already paying VAT at a percentage rate, as Kate's pointed out. So a percentage rate we think is both fairer and then long term is easier to manage because everybody knows what it is. It's not going to go up and down depending on what future mayors think, or when inflation means that the flat rate has to be raised. And it's understood, it's implemented in a lot of places around the world that have a levy like this. So we broadly support that. But of course, we wait to see what the government does. I fully agree with your 5 points, and particularly the simplicity, so that the tourists can understand it, as it's easy to implement, and we'll see what they do in terms of setting the sort of national framework in which this will operate.
Thank you. Got a second question just about operation and how this would work. So how do you think the levy should be collected from bookings made through Airbnb and other online platforms? And should those platforms be responsible for collecting and remitting? So that's a very operational question. Actually, could you perhaps start with that one?
So absolutely, and there's a real opportunity here as well, because what has developed in London is really quite a dynamic system. We've got lots of different types of hotel accommodation. I should say that there's been a real improvement in the quality of the sector over the last 20, 30 years. There's been a real drive from various bodies, but the industry itself has done a really good job at rooting out some poor operators, so the whole standard's got much better, which is really good. But then at the same time, you've got Airbnb and other platforms of offering a similar sort of service. And then I have to say there's a sort of grey sector, which I know the hotels and, in fact, Airbnb are very concerned about, where people are offering, in some cases, illegal or unapproved short lets of sometimes social housing, as well as subletting of flats on an overnight basis, and undercutting everybody else. And sometimes these turn up on some of the actual very reputable hotel websites. Now that's an area that we'd like to look into, and actually this would give us an opportunity to look into that space and some enforcement in that area. Because it's not fair, and also it's not a very good experience for the tourists to turn up at what's been presented to them as a hotel room, and turns out to be a room, in an apartment block with none of the services or amenities, or indeed health and safety and all the other things that the sector provides. So we want to make sure that we tackle that. This will be a big thing for us. We don't currently collect any sort of levies or tax like this. So the process of creating a system to collect it and to enforce it is something that the team is looking at in great detail. And actually, some of the other regions, some of the mayoral strategic authorities, are looking to us, because we've got a bigger team and we've got more resources and a bit more experience of, through TfL and other things, and obviously the Met Police of big systems, to see how we will implement it. But the start point has got to be to do it as efficiently as possible, in terms of the cost of collection and the burden on the collectors in terms of the accommodation sector has got to be as low as possible. So that's something we're working through at the moment, and that will form part of the consultation, the process, if and when the government makes the announcement and we get to the point where the mayor takes a decision and we start. But it's a lot of work to collect it and enforce it, and it'll be a big job.
Thank you. But would anyone else like to come in on that case?
Thank you. I think we have a principle of universality. If you are selling accommodation for commercial gain, you should be covered by this, and that should be part of the reason. And that was part of the justification for introducing an overnight visitor levy, rather than having the voluntary bids that we've got in Manchester and Liverpool, was that you could capture this. There is an essential prerequisite to that being introduced, however, and that is that the government moves and implements the statutory registration scheme in full. We can't tax what we can't see, and in order to be able to tax anybody who is offering accommodation, we need to have them on a national register so that it can be enforced. I would also say that what you need to have is a national scheme for collection, so that we don't have businesses facing different compliance costs or administrative costs because they're doing a different way of collecting it in Manchester than they are in London. I don't think that will happen, but it should be set up nationally. So these are essential precursors. It's not about delaying it, it's about making sure you take time to get the process right so that the businesses that are paying extra tax are treated fairly.
So there is an unintended positive consequence where these unregulated places actually then, unless they're registered, that they can't advertise. Is that correct?
That would be our proposal, yes. I mean, the government has consulted. It was a consultation that was carried out in the last administration to introduce a statutory levy, a statutory registration scheme to make sure that all commercial lets, Airbnb and others, were registered, so that local authorities, the GLA, could know where these businesses were and where they were operating and treat them as a business rather than something that was just being let on the black market or treated illegally, that we could make sure that everything that was being offered was safe, legal and compliant with the minimum requirements. But in order to tax them, you've got to know where they are, they've got to be registered, and then it should be the platforms that are liable. They should have a responsibility here too, because they benefit from tourism expenditure, they benefit from what the traditional businesses are paying in, but they are not contributing at the moment.
Thank you. Anybody else? Matthew?
Just to reiterate support for a single collection point, both from a point of view of minimising the administrative burden on businesses, but also with an eye to maximising the flow of any revenues from this being reinvested back into growth and promotion of the sector, as opposed to multiple system costs dotted around the country.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you. Just 2 points. I think one, directly on your question, yes, we do see this internationally, that places like Lisbon are able to reach agreements with platforms such as Airbnb to handle some of the collection aspects of any such fee. I think it should be possible to arrange the same things with Airbnb or Booking.com in London as well. My second point is just to sort of follow on from what Howard was saying about developing London's capacity to collect and enforce this sort of tax. Obviously, London is not currently a billing authority for local taxation at present. That's done by the constituent boroughs. Developing the GLA's ability to collect and set taxes on its own terms, that's one of the important prerequisites for advancing fiscal devolution within England. So, again, thinking about how we can use the overnight visitor levy to establish some of these concepts and principles for going further down the fiscal devolution route, it is an important part of the argument for the levy.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And it was certainly something in conversation that we had with New York as part of the devolution conversation in terms of that single registration. As you pointed out, Kate, actually allows that illegal and dangerous activity to then be pulled out, and obviously they'd be able to be done for fraud as well as all the other elements that they're currently doing. So one of the potential benefits of this overnight stay levy coming into play. Next up, I've got Assembly Member Clark.
Thank you, Chair. I've just kind of been, I'm going to flourish, if I may, since some of my questions have been answered. But I was thinking about the last time I visited the US, and when we were talking about different levels of sales tax, different levels of extra additional charges. I mean, one thing that really strikes me about London is you can spend your whole day in London going through royal parks, visiting amazing museums for free. Over 100 museums are free. There are things that do cost less when you're visiting London in terms of attraction and money you might spend. Just last summer, I was in Chicago with my 2 children, and we were going to go visit the Art Museum in Chicago, and the Art Institute was $32 a day. My children are over 18, so that's $96 plus 10.6% city tax. You could visit several comparable museums in London for free as a tourist, but it wasn't just $96. It was actually a Tuesday, so it was closed. So that aside, I do think while we're talking about taxes and fees and everything that it costs to visit London, there's a reason that we have so many visitors here, and that's because we have such an excellent offer. Some of it is free of charge. Anyway, so as we'll know, in London, the hotels and accommodation is not evenly spread. We have many more places to stay in our central area. Still hotels, as we learned about Hanger Lane earlier, hotels that are a little bit further afield. If you wanted to visit the RAF Museum in my constituency, you'd be staying in Hendon Central. So there are places to stay outside of that central zone, but the majority is more in zones 1 and 2. Would we be looking at the same levy across the Greater London Authority area, or would we be thinking more that it would apply differently in central London than outer London?
I'll take that. We would suggest that you'd have the same levy across London, because it's back to, if it's a percentage, then the amount paid by somebody on the North Circular in a Travelodge is going to be less than you pay for going in central London. But this raises a couple of issues. And one of the things that it hasn't been raised here today yet, but that London councils suggested was that some of the money should be specifically earmarked for the boroughs in which it's collected, or specifically earmarked for London councils. Now, first of all, I would say that in any programmes funded by the levy to support growth and investment in the sector, that we'd want to work with London councils as we have done historically on European funding and SPF funding and so on. Absolutely vital partners in the delivery of this, and particularly because we have a long-term plan as we grow our tourist base in London, both Londoners doing London, and there's not enough of that. We could do a lot more of that, and people coming from outside London, from the UK, and international visitors, to actually promote things like Hendon Museum, like some of the amazing parks and attractions we've got outside of the sort of traditional tourist heart, and to look at where we can develop new things. So, for example, we're actually doing extremely well in selling music tickets in the city. We probably need another 25,000-seat arena somewhere. And that would sensibly be somewhere on, a major transport hub, but out of the centre, which you could then develop some additional tourism around with new hotels and so on. So encouraging development of the visitor economy outside of the centre as well is part of what we want to do, and we've got a long-term programme to do that. The other thing is, if you were to say we'll charge, we'll pass the money on to the boroughs where the money is collected, you get the perverse impact that places that actually have a lot of tourists coming through them, like for example Lambeth and Southwark, but don't have a lot of hotel rooms, would be disadvantaged compared to the 3 or 4 boroughs where most of the accommodation is currently clustered, and sort of nearly half the money would go to a relatively small number of boroughs in the centre. So it's back to the point raised earlier that it's very important for us that this is additional spend ring-fenced for growth and investment in the sector and related activity, not to replace funding that should be coming from central government and from local government for basic public services. But there is an opportunity here for a London-wide investment, and for that reason, we think it should be the same across the city. But again, it's down to the government. They may mandate that in what they come back with as a result of the consultation. they may decide something else. So let's see. But our starting point would be same across London and the same percentage rate.
Anthony, did you want to come in?
Good, great. Thank you for the question. So we would advocate that a kind of an all-London rate is made consistent across the entire capital city. From our international evidence that we've considered, we can't find any examples where a kind of upper-tier jurisdiction is, an upper-tier sort of local jurisdiction is setting varying rates by the constituent or lower-tier municipalities beneath them. So it seems wherever it is the case that there is kind of local variation in a kind of visitor levy, it's consistent at the level at which the body that's making that decision is actually setting the rate of the levy. You should, if you're, one thing to consider from that is if you are worried about the visitor levy being set at too high a level, you should welcome the idea that it is consistent across London, rather than having a situation in which we set very high rates in the kind of central 3 or 4 boroughs and then much lower rates in other parts of the city. If we have a consistent all-London approach, that should help reduce some of the pressure to increase rates on those kind of high revenue authorities. What does seem to be a bit more common, and this might be kind of a future question coming along down the track, is vertical sharing between the kind of upper-tier jurisdiction and the lower-tier jurisdictions. That's very common across a number of different countries that we considered. Obviously, London councils have made a call for that to be split 50-50 between the GLA and any constituent councils. We think that splitting it to some degree makes sense, given lots of the local boroughs are actually providing the services that are relevant to the visitor economy, both planning permissions, street cleaning and similar. Those require funding to maintain them. We would recommend kind of at least a 2/3 split in favour of the GLA versus the individual local authorities on 2 grounds. One is that the benefits of the kind of visitor economy are not just concentrated in those individual local authorities. There's workers in all of the different London boroughs who are commuting in to central London who could be benefited positively by investment in services or in kind of growth-enhancing infrastructure. But the second reason why we think a 2/3 split is appropriate is that compared to a lot of other countries around the world, the GLA currently has a very limited financial base. So if we're thinking about how are we trying to kind of, again, expand the fiscal autonomy of London and provide the city with stronger growth incentives across many different areas of policy, it makes sense to go a little bit further in favour of the GLA relative to lots of the other funding powers which are currently held at the borough level.
Yeah, thank you. Just on the point of view of the sort of geographic coverage, I don't think we've taken a strong view of that, but our assumption was it would be across London in terms of the boundary line, and whatever the outcome of that, we would very much urge consistency of approach across the entire geographic boundary. And then in terms of this idea of whether revenues ought to be shared with London boroughs or not, I think our start point of that is being really clear what is the money designed to be used for before you decide who is best to receive it, but on the premise that the funds ought to be targeted at growth and at boosting of tourism and so on. Our instinct again is that actually it's the mayor that is best placed to receive those funding in order to go into the tourism promotion right across London and so on, because I think we are very wary of this point of dilution and it being used to backfill for other services. And I think the view from the industry would be, to be perfectly honest, we pay very significant amount of tax already that is designed to pay for those services. And if there are funding shortfalls, that actually is an issue of essentially sort of different tiers of government, and you sort your back office wiring out to make sure those revenues flow to the right places, rather than use this to substitute as a substitution effect for it.
Fair enough. Kate, you look like you maybe coming in.
Matthew took the words right out of my mouth. This is not a levy, nor should it be a levy to fund vital public services at a London level or at a local level. The hospitality sector pays £54 billion a year in taxes. 75% of all of our profits go back to the national exchequer and are then redistributed. We are the most heavily taxed sector of the economy. We are taxed twice as heavily as financial services just down the road or up the road. I can't get my geography right. Wherever in the city and in Canary Wharf, we are taxed twice as heavily as that, but we operate on 4% net profit margins. And across the London, 25% of the economy and jobs are dependent upon the hospitality sector. So I just think we need to be careful about thinking of us as a goose that lays a golden egg that can be used to fund all sorts of public services. If we are doing this levy, it should and must be ring-fenced. It has to be London-wide, it has to be universal, it has to be the same approach, and it has to be ring-fenced to work on the measures that will drive visitors to the capital. That's not that, you know, it's not just about supporting the visitor economy or other nebulous concepts that I've heard variously fund policing, transport, planning, licensing. That's not what this is for. It should be about driving growth. It should be about getting more visitors, coming more frequently, spending much more of their money with us. And that's where it needs to be ring-fenced and spent on it. It cannot be about local services. And therefore, I agree that if it's raised centrally, it should be spent centrally and it should be directed strategically by the Mayor, because the Mayor has the mechanisms in place to be able to talk to all of us who are impacted and affected across all 32 boroughs. That's precisely why the mayors have been successful in lobbying central government to say this has to be introduced. At the moment, we have business improvement districts. We have masses of them across London that are funding vital public services in the heart of the West End, out in Wembley, all of those kind of areas where businesses are working voluntarily and putting their money where their mouth is to improve their local communities. This can't be additive to, this has to be additive to that, not dilution.
So I think we're at risk of going into the next question.
Yes, yeah, so I've got Assembly Member Lord Bailey and then Assembly Member Lord Beccaro. Lord Beccaro, not quite, yeah.
A very quick question on targeting of this charge. So there's many voluntary groups who are now going to be punished with this charge. I happen to be very heavily involved with the cadets. We regularly bring cadets into issues here. They are volunteers. They are spending their own money to be around those young children. They provide a massive public benefit. We are about to punish them. Should they be exempt? I could tell you about the Scouts, the Girl Guides, Boys and Girls Club, the Jewish Boys and Girls Club, all of these different organisations, and they're just the ones who spring to mind, are now going to be paying this levy. Is that correct? Or is the Mayor, Deputy Mayor, thinking of a way of having them excluded from this heavy cost?
Well, I think first we have to see if the government sets up any national-wide exclusions. Secondly, this isn't clearly this isn't about punishment or anything like that. This is about fairness across the board. And you are right to say that in terms of voluntary groups camping out, in terms of where people have a hospital stay that turns into a 5-star long-term convalescence, and actually that's driving quite a bit of accommodation in central London around Harley Street, where people will take a very smart hotel room with some medical support. Are those covered? That's something that will be in the consultation. Though I would say that for Scouts, you know, you're paying £8 a night. Back to the percentage. That's another example where you don't want a flat rate. A percentage of £8. You know, 5% percentage of £8 is 40p. So it doesn't make a lot of difference. But that's something we'd have to look at, and the unforeseen, you know, the unintended consequences of having a London-wide set percentage. You know, it's something we'd be very sensitive to when we go through both the consultation as we set up the system.
I have to be quick because the chair's running out of time, but if you have 300 cadets, 40 pence does make a difference. And Assembly Member Baker gave an example of museums being free in New York. Being free here and costly abroad. What she forgets is the poorest Londoners are subsidising some of the richest people in the world to have free museums.
Well, we're looking at that on the next meeting, but Kate, bring you in.
Can I just make one very quick observation? If you look to Wales, when Wales introduced their legislation on overnight visitor levy, they excluded children, or included children. Scotland excluded them, sorry. So you have got opportunities that you could exclude under 18s.
Absolutely, and I think presumably, Howard, as with business rates, there's discretionary powers over how that's implemented as well. So,
well, again, we'd have to wait and see what the government puts into the system and what they mandate at the national level. But we are very sensitive to these things. We'll look at all of this in the consultation, and people will have an opportunity to contribute to that. And we'll be looking to particularly those sectors which are, yes, they're providing overnight accommodation, but it's ancillary to something else. Young people, the sort of very low-cost things in terms of making sure that they have their voice heard into the consultation process.
Assemblymember Bukhari.
Thank you. So we've been hearing about where you have been discussing about levy revenue and where you don't want it to be spent. But if we do get this levy in and the revenue, what should it be funding? So I'm going to start with Anthony, then Kate, and then Matthew. What do you want the money to go to?
So, thank you for your question, Assembly Member. So I think we would reiterate a lot of the comments made on the panel that the strongest case for introducing the levy as a growth instrument would be to then invest both back into the things that support growth of the visitor economy, but also things like infrastructure and wider kind of economic development programs that we know that the city needs, whether that's perhaps in skills, whether that's in commercial property, whether that's in planning capacity, etc. I think what we do advocate, though, is that we think that the case for strict hypothecation of the spending is relatively weak. We don't see many international examples that mandate kind of line by line, this is what you absolutely can spend it on, this is what you cannot spend it on. What we do see is a bit more common internationally is a form of sort of almost soft hypothecation, where there is a general commitment to spend on things related to the visitor economy. However, because the visitor economy is, as Kate has mentioned, is a broad and quite nebulous term, actual enforcement of any soft hypothecation seems to be quite difficult in places where it is implemented. So for us, I think it's more that having a political commitment from the Mayor of London, or indeed Mayor of Greater Manchester, Mayor of Liverpool City Region, to set out a strategy that both reinvests back into the visitor economy, but then also has some degree of investment for economic growth across the wider city region, is what we would recommend.
So Kate, can you see that happening within your sector, that growth from the revenue?
Yes, if it's correctly targeted and spent and there is a degree of hypothecation. I think what we would say is that where it works well and can be made to work, and we've got examples on a voluntary basis in Manchester and Liverpool, is where you've got a clear visitor economy strategy that it's drawn up with the local visitor economy partnership involving the businesses, so a genuine public-private partnership working out what are the strategic objectives for growth in that visitor economy or the experience economy, however you frame it. And then you can see how any spend is related to delivering those objectives. So if you start with your core objectives of how many people are you wanting to attract, what types of visitors are you wanting to attract, where, when and how, business, music, entertainment, domestic, international, you can then look at how you are spending that money in order to attract those visitors, bring them in and increase the numbers and their spend and their dwell time. So it all comes back to how do you get more bums in beds? Because those are the visitors that generate the biggest return, and that generates the positive return for all of us across London, because it gets the London economy moving more generally. The taxi drivers are happy, and it's always important to keep the taxi drivers happy. The coffee shops, the builders, the electricians, the marketeers, the lawyers, the financial services, the restaurants, everybody gets a positive halo effect if we get that moving, and then we get back into job, skills and investment.
And from Business London's perspective, I'm also interested to know not just where you think the money should go, but also whether you think there should be a formal role being played within the businesses on how it's being spent and recommended.
Yeah, thank you. So look, our emphasis is we would put the funds towards promoting London, attracting tourism and so on into the capital. We also think it could play a useful role, particularly in driving and supporting attractions in quieter or off-peak parts of the year and the calendar, for example. That would be a positive addition. And as you say, we, as I said right at the outset, we think it is important that those levy collectors have a meaningful say over how the funds are used. And I think that would be a great proof point, in actual fact. If it can command their support in terms of where the money is proposed to be spent, then that is probably a very clear indication that it's on the right lines.
Great. Now, Howard, there has been this proposal from London councils about retaining at least 50% of the levy revenue. Now, I think this is what we were alluding to earlier. Keeping the levy local is the push from London councils. So, considering that, I mean, some of the arguments are saying that boroughs do have to pay for the day-to-day costs of tourism, which is street cleaning, waste management, park safety, community safety. Where are the lines that could fall into the concerns that some of our panel guests have been saying? Where how do you not prevent a council saying, well, we're going to use this money for potholes, for example?
I don't like to ever pick a fight with London councils, but we have a disagreement here because London councils have set out that they think there should be a formal allocation of part of any levy money to London councils to distribute, and we think that it should be done in partnership with them, but the money should come to us, and we should then work with them on how it's spent. But the principle, we do think, and we agree with the other members of the panel, that it shouldn't be to replace existing funding. If existing funding is not meeting the needs, then there are other conversations we need to have with central government about meeting the needs, but not replacing regular council funding with this. This has got to be incremental, additional, and focused on supporting growth and supporting the sector where the money's raised from. I should also say, just in answer to the previous question, there's a real danger here that everybody gets very excited about what could be a significant amount of money and spends it sort of many times over before we've had the legislation, before we've had the decision, and before we've even got the money. So there's a real danger here that you get over excited about spending it. But the sort of things that could be done with this sort of funding, which cannot be done now, to the point on, we have a quiet period in February and March where there's not very much on. The Christmas has finished, and actually it's the time the hotels are quietest. What this could be used to do is let's look at some big things that we could actually create, we could curate in London to fill up that space. If we could do that, that would probably pay for the levy itself by filling up the hotels, getting more visitors into London in that quiet period. So there's investments that we could make into things supporting bringing new things to London, which currently we just wouldn't have the money to do, which would then have a direct positive impact on the sector. So the Mayor, we'll have to wait and see what the government says in terms of restrictions on what the money's spent on. But the Mayor's said growth and supporting the sector.
Yeah, so you just want to alleviate that kind of concern of they won't be being spent on potholes. Can we just make that clear? Because I think that's what we've been alluding to with the other concerns. Can we just get that guaranteed?
I don't want to prejudice anything. But we've been clear about the start point, and then the focus of expenditure will be part of the consultation. And so for example, I wouldn't want to rule out that there couldn't be some support for transport projects from this, because particularly where they support the growth of the sector and growth of the economy in London, you could see that this could support some transport projects. So, but we'll have to work on, first of all, the restrictions the government gives us, and then through the consultation as we talk about how we might bring a scheme into operation.
I can see Kate wants to come in, yes.
Can I just make one very short observation, Chair, with permission? We don't want to rely on assurances. We want to have this written into legislation. If this is coming into force, the government needs to make sure. The government said 2 weeks before they introduced this in the budget, 2 weeks before ministers stood up in the House and said this wasn't going to happen, they categorically were not going to do this. There has been no pre-legislative scrutiny. We haven't seen any details of the bill. There is a lot that needs to go through. We believe this needs to be set out in legislation. There should be formal statutory requirements that limit what is the visitor economy, or set out what the visitor economy is, what support for the visitor economy entails, not getting in the way of local discretion on how funds are set, but that there is a requirement to make sure that it is clearly ring-fenced and that that's set out in the legislation. Also, we believe that there should be a formal requirement to consult on a statutory basis. If you were going to introduce, for example, an early morning restriction order or a late night levy across London, there are formal requirements to produce a prospectus, to provide evidence, to set out how the funds will be raised, to set out how they will be used. That should all be formally set out, as should the ability, and I'm not saying you can't spend on big infrastructure projects, but part of the benefit of this is that you can borrow against future levy receipts, and there should be a distinction between what the levy is paying for, which should be marketing and generating growth in visitor numbers, and what that borrowing could be used for. And finally, an annual report, and at all points in that, there should be a statutory consultation with affected businesses.
Thank you.
Thank you. Assemblyman Bacaro, so we're running out of time at the moment, so
quick question.
super quick.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to just end with this: that we're talking about growth, and one of the things that I think that London gets a massive amount of growth from is from Notting Hill Carnival. So, Howard, I would love to know whether there is any discussions or thought about going forward with the levy being able to, at least in part, or support the Notting Hill Carnival.
Not to my knowledge, but let's be clear. The Mayor has stepped in to support Notting Hill Carnival previously. It's a huge calling card for London. I was there last year with the police team, and the new equipment we've got, the intelligence we've got to make sure it goes off, in the best possible way. Phenomenal event, and we've got others as well like that. Pride is a phenomenal thing. The fireworks, and this would enable us to, in theory, support other set-piece events, but there's been no discussion about that specifically.
Yeah. I mean, if we're talking about growth, we want the levy to encourage growth. Notting Hill Carnival is a classic example. There you go.
And when we get to the consultation, that's a very
hold it there.
You say yes.
thing to put.
I'm going to move it on. If only we had a council leader here who's already spent this money 10 times over in his head. Hold on, Assembly Member Georgie. Okay.
Guys, I've already blown your whole budget. It's been baked in. I think, Howard, you've got me back on board because you've slagged off London Council, so well done. You've got a tick in my book. Well done. I don't like it. I've been honest. And I think the one thing, Howard, I would stay away from is people in this building do not know about hosting attractions that people want to come and visit. So get that out of your head right now. Don't spend money on that because, with the greatest respect, whatever we host is not going to get punters through the door. As we said, Kate, bums in beds. I like that. I'm going to use that one from now on. And I would also just say, Kate, there was one thing that I picked up on where you were saying that effectively the ring fencing should be put down in legislation. I'd say be careful what you wish for the simple reason that everybody knows, although budgets are alleged ring fenced, they never are in reality because you just reallocate, you distribute based on what you know what's coming in and going out. This mayor does it, all governments do it, all local authority leaders do it. But I would say this, Kate, and just for my own sanity. So you say that it shouldn't, I appreciate you haven't said it categorically, that nothing should go into frontline services. It should be ring-fenced perhaps for the sector and how to support them in the future. But in reality, when people choose where to visit, New York, one of the things you always get is when this mayor was in charge, it was safer. When this mayor, it's not, and I get that as American family members of mine, they say, Alex, if you're going to go to New York, don't do it this year, go the next year, because we don't feel safe when we go in for work. So safety, transport, roads, parks, museums, waste collection are all things that have been mentioned. Surely if we improve these things and the money went towards those ambitions, surely we'd get more people in visiting London, therefore helping the sector a bit more?
This is all about additionality. This is about improving where we are at the moment from a baseline and seeing if we can bring more people in. And therefore, while I don't disagree with you, the fact that you could use that money, why would you be taxing one set of visitors, one type of business? Why are you choosing to not tax the City of London a little bit more because they might be able to afford it in order to fund those services too? It's sort of, this is the point about the fiscal devolution. I'm all for fiscal devolution, but we've picked up in isolation one lever that we think might be able to help, and are suddenly seeing it as a silver bullet to solve all the ills across the whole of local government and across the whole of London. Just to put this in context, when I went out to Denver The Mayor of Denver, working in public-private partnership, has more to spend on tourism marketing than all of the UK.
Yeah.
We are outgunned, outspent. New York can spend 4 or 5 times the amount. If we've got money that's coming in, and I'm not in favour of this as a tax, I don't think this is the right thing to do. I think it's the wrong tax at the wrong time, and there are different ways of raising these money and funds to be able to do it. If we've got that precious money, let's spend it on marketing to get people to come to London, to come to the UK.
Well,
that's what we should be doing.
We would have to disagree. I don't think London and Partners have evidence they would ever achieve that, but that's by the by.
Well, when I chaired the mayor's... I can only give you my experience.
So let me just if I may come back to this point. Yeah. I think the way that Londoners would see this, as I say, this is why I'm opposed to fiscal devolution, because taxes only ever go up, and we introduce new taxes that find way to squeeze everybody equally.
Right, do need to get a question out of you.
Yeah. So what I would say is, if the mayor came along and said, you know what, tourists put a lot of pressure on public services when it comes to crime, when it comes to waste, when it comes to museums, when it comes to safety, why shouldn't we tax them to come and stay in our city and pay for these services? Because if I was the mayor, that's how I would pitch it. So why would he be wrong if he did that?
Well, he would be wrong if he did that, because you're not going to be able to work with the industry that is bearing the tax and the cost to be able to deliver the benefits. And if you did do that and you diverted those funds away from marketing and encouraging bums in beds, you would see a decline in the number of people coming to London. You've got that sort of paying for things that you don't see the direct benefit for. I think that would result in a diminution of the spend that we've got in total, because it would leave an opt-out to say that you're not getting money at a local council level for some of those other things. Those areas might improve the tourist experience, but it doesn't make a material difference as to whether somebody comes to the UK or doesn't. And what we should be doing as well is say, 80% of visitors to the UK, inbound international visitors to the UK, don't leave Zone 1. We should be using this money to make sure that we are getting the benefits across London to all of those areas of London, that they feel the economic benefit of the spending power that these visitors have, and in expanding it across the UK as a whole to be able to get that economic benefit, expanding it from being a 3-night stay where somebody comes for a tour of Europe and they stay in London for 2-3 nights, to making them stay for 5 nights, making them stay for 7, exploring all the benefits, sharing the sort of area and love around where people are coming and valuing it. And finally, I would just say, this is not just tourists. It's wrong to call this a tourist tax. This is builders from Romford going and staying in a travel lodge to build wherever we're building in Bristol. It's people who are coming from London, from outside of London, to stay with family and friends, to come for graduation ceremonies. This is not just international rich tourists and visitors, and therefore we have to be very careful that these people who are already paying a lot of tax, both the customer and the business, are not paying more.
Okay, we're already run out of time, so I'm going to. So just to check, Assemblymember Wilson, do you have very, very quick, and then we'll give everyone the opportunity to just have a final word.
Yeah. So, we've talked about, Howard, you've certainly talked about wanting to try and work with the sector and work with businesses to try and implement this in a way that kind of minimises the impact, which is a lovely sentiment, and let's hope it can be done. So, what kind of things have you got in mind for that process, and what opportunities are there for the sector to be involved in this consultation and shaping how this ends up being implemented if it does?
Okay, so, I would need to come back on something that Assemblymember Georgiou said as well. So we've had an ongoing conversation about this actually for quite a long time. It's been floating around as an idea for a little while. So it's been an ongoing conversation on how this might work if it ever came up. And that's been done more in earnest just recently. So we're having that consultation and engagement right now. There'll be a formal consultation process, and obviously we will work to look how we can include those collecting the levy in the process of how it's spent on an ongoing basis. So Once we're through the is it going to happen or not, we're actually very lost of commonality between what we think and what Kate and Matthew have been talking about today. And just on, first of all, London Partners, which I'm chair of, for complete declaration. No, but it is, look, compared to all of our competitors around the world, the bang for buck for London Partners is extraordinary. The organisation runs extremely efficiently. It does lots of good stuff. And back to your point about we can't run events. We run London Tech Week with 30,000 people coming in from all over the world, biggest tech event in Europe. We run London Life Sciences Week, which is now growing rapidly to be the equivalent of the JPM conference for Europe, the premier European Life Sciences conference. We support London Fashion Week. We support London Film Festival. We bring US sports to the Olympic Park. We've supported things like ABBA. And we actually, all of us, including lots of people who still work for the GLA, ran a pretty good Olympic Games, frankly. So we working in partnership with our partners in the private sector are pretty good at doing events, and we should be quite proud of that and our track record as a city, because it is one of the things that makes people want to come here.
And just one very, very more quick point. This is back to Kate. So I think we're on the same page in not agreeing with the principalists in the first place, which is fine. And the reason behind that being another tax on an already beleaguered sector. Would it help sweeten the pill if the Mayor was to come out and back the VAT's the Problem campaign and join us in arguing for a 10% VAT rate, as our international competitors seem to be doing?
I think that's called leading the witness, isn't it? Undoubtedly the case, and we've been quite open about this with all of the mayors. They all claim that we're an outlier in not having a tourism tax. We say we're an outlier in having the highest rate of VAT. There is clearly a balance to be set there if you're looking at competitiveness and price and the attractiveness of our consumer operation. If VAT was lowered, you can see that now. We've got a reduced rate of VAT during the summer for tourist attractions and eating out for families. It is driving footfall, it is driving demand, and it will generate jobs.
All right, thank you very much. And 30 seconds, final words before we close. I'll go to Anthony first.
Great, thank you, Chair. So I think my final thoughts are we've had a little bit of discussion here about hypothecation and some of the challenges and maybe kind of reasons why we might do that. I think one parallel thing to consider is not the threat of the kind of difficulties of hypothecation, but the threat of equalisation, such that we have heard there's discussions about the fact that London has a very large potential tourist tax base may mean there's kind of discussions about should London's grant from central government be reduced in order to fill any kind of increase in revenues that are generated as a result from that. This would be a terrible idea for London. We absolutely should not be trying to equalise the levy across different parts of the UK because tourist demand is so varied across the country. Even if Assembly members really do not like the idea of a levy, I think for the sake of London's economy and for the sake of London's tax base, that we would recommend that a consistent position is taken that equalisation is not a good idea for the visitor levy.
Here, right. Matthew.
Thank you. Yeah, just one perspective we've not talked about much this afternoon, actually, is the front of house staff or the employee at the front desk. And I think that is a really good reason why we should be thinking about simplicity, we should be thinking about consistency, and if there are any challenges or appeals, they should be routed through to here, as opposed to expecting front of house individuals to have to deal with those queries.
Thank you, Matthew. Kate?
Well, I think that goes back to my principles, my 5 principles. Keep it simple, keep it fair, universal, minimal admin for the business, and definitely pro-tourism, transparent ring fencing of those revenues for tourism, destination management certainly, but that should be tourism promotion and encouragement of visiting. One of the things that we haven't touched on is the implementation period if this is introduced. We have got various business improvement districts that are running, which hotels are already paying into. We need to make sure we don't have double taxation of those businesses while that's running through, and we want to make sure that those schemes are not adversely impacted. So we need to have practical and pragmatic approach to implementation. Once we've gone through all of the consultations that Howard's talked about, we think there needs to be a minimum 12-month implementation period before those taxes start to be levied, so that we're not rushing businesses and we're not rushing schemes, but making sure that there's a smooth transition so that the money goes. And then finally, evidence-based and justified, so that you've got a local visitor economy strategy, a local visitor economy partnership, to be able to come together to work out what is the objective and what you're trying to do in centrally and strategically at a central London level, and then that directs how the money is spent.
Thank you very much. And finally, Deputy Mayor.
Just to say that, in line with your very good report, this is a significant bit of, potentially significant bit of fiscal devolution. Being able to deliver it will demonstrate that we're capable of taking on more as well. And this is about not additional taxation. This is an additional levy on visitors, but where we've got existing taxation that's better raised and spent at London level. And hopefully more to come. Let's see what comes out of the new government.
Thank you very much. And thank you, particularly Matthew. My second job after being security guard was actually working at the front line in hospitality and hotels on the Hanger Lane, actually. So,
there you go.
Funny, not in the A to B hotel, but it was in the Holiday Inn, which is now Crown Plaza. Not to plug any particular hotel lines, others are available. Look, thank you very much to all of our guests, and we've reached the conclusion of our discussion on the overnight visitor levy. I can ask the committee to note the report and the discussion. Noted. And can we also delegate authority to myself as chair, consultation with group party leads, and agree any output from the discussion? And I'd like to thank again our guests for coming along today and for your contributions. We'll now take a short adjournment, come back at 4 o'clock for our next investigation. Thank you. Okay, so welcome back to the London Assembly Economy, Culture and Skills Committee meeting. We now move on to the discussion regarding the London Stadium. In the chamber, we are joined by Lynn Garner, who is the chair of the London Stadium LLP. We had invited Karim Varani, the new interim chief executive officer for West Ham Football Club, but unfortunately is unable to join us and has sent us a letter, which I'll refer to, and I'm sure colleagues will refer to during the meeting. We had also invited the previous Mayor Boris Johnson, who'd signed the original deal, but was somehow busy as well. So, first of all, Lynn, thank you very much for attending today and in terms of the questions that we've got for you. We know that obviously with West Ham United unfortunately being relegated for the forthcoming season, that does apply an additional pressure of about £2.5 million annually in terms of the public subsidy for the stadium. Where would you say the financial position of the stadium is as we currently stand?
Thank you, and it's great to be back. Haven't been here for quite a long time. Look, the financial situation remains challenging at London Stadium. Just picking up on the 2.5 million, current projections are sitting at around 1.8. We've built in an envelope of between 2 and 2.5. It rather depends on how the commercial rights move during that period, but we are hoping to bring it in under 2.5. We've been able to do a deal with the LED, which we expected not to be able to do, which has brought in a bit of extra income and really helped us with that number. So currently looking about 1.8, but we'll be keeping an eye on that as we go forward.
Sorry, could you just clarify LED?
The advertising strip that runs around the pitch. Yeah. So we sell some of that and we have a receipt for it. It's shared with the football club. We thought we would lose all of that with the relegation. In fact, we haven't lost all of it. So we've recouped some against the budget. But very close eye on that as we go through. Zooming out and looking at the challenge as a whole, in 25-26, we are going to finalise the accounts at around a £19 million operating loss. This is not unusual. It's been in this ballpark for some time. We have a few peaks and troughs depending on how many summer events we have. 25-26 was a particularly bad year for London Stadium with only 2 summer concerts. This year's a bit better. With this summer, we've just hosted 6 events, 5 concerts and Soccer Aid. That's helping with the finances. But of course, it's 1 step forward and 2 steps back because of the relegation reduction. So we're still in the same ballpark of about 19 million. We have managed to drive efficiencies over several years. Some big ticket items include seats replacement with more efficient seat moves, utilities around solar, LED lighting and so on. And commercial deals are much better than ever they were for the commercial rights that we own. However, of course, we remain responsible for all the overheads, all of the repair and maintenance for a huge national venue, and that's extremely costly. And that's part of what drives the result.
So knowing what you know now, Lynn, if the deal that is currently on the table and has been signed, obviously about 10 years ago, if that was put before you now, would you recommend it to your board to sign?
Absolutely not.
Okay, and we've had obviously that West Ham were unable to provide a representative for today's meeting. They do have circa about 300 members of staff, in which case we had expected at least one of them to be able to be available this afternoon to join us. They have said in their letter they're fully committed to maintaining a positive working relationship with the committee. How have you seen a positive working relationship with yourself as chair of the London Stadium, and particularly since the change in control at the football club?
Yeah, I mean, the relationship with the football club historically has been quite tense. We've disagreed on interpretations around the contractual piece, and I don't think that's any surprise when the taxpayer is under such a huge pressure. As soon as there's a chance to interpret a clause in the contract differently that might be to the advantage of the taxpayer, we have taken that, obviously. And when you've got a bunch of officers who are under that financial pressure, they will try to use the contract as much as they possibly can. It's a very good contract for West Ham United. Well done, is what I say, in terms of the original negotiation. Great. But obviously it causes pressures and tensions. What we've noticed just recently is there have been a significant loosening of that relationship, in the sense that Karim got in touch straight away. Our joint executive teams are meeting on a regular basis to discuss improvements to the stadium, working far more in partnership, talking about the potential for joint commercial deals and so on. Not much has actually happened yet, but we're very mindful that the club's, you know, in a highly pressurised situation at the moment. It's just been relegated. It's just been in a transfer window. We're approaching a start of a new football season. So a lot's going on for the football club, and we really appreciate that. But we very much welcome the open-mindedness that we've got at the moment, and we have noticed it very much so.
That's really positive to hear. One of the things that Karim has written in his letter is said that the agreement included additions and increases should West Ham United be successful on the pitch, but also protections to help cushion the reduction in revenue should the club be relegated from the Premier League. Of course, we've now seen them get relegated. You talked about the 1.8 million. It's potentially up to 2.5, depending on how the rest of the season goes from that point of view. They did, of course, win the Europa Conference League not that long ago with, I think, about £12 million worth of additional income off the back of that. My understanding is that the contract then landed us with a massive windfall of £185,000 off the back of that, which I've calculated it being 1.54% of commission of that benefit. Does that seem fair to you?
I think, to me, it doesn't matter whether it's fair or not. A commercial deal was done at the time, and we're in a contract, and we must honour it. And the contract was signed. There are no break clauses in this contract, so we have to face into that and see what we can do around the edges to improve the situation. Interestingly, on the Europa Cup, very much remember this, of course, because I was around at the time. Of course, if there are more games, like cup games, that just costs us more to operate the stadium because we make a loss for every match that we put on. So it was great getting the 180k, but it made a very small dent in the operational losses for the additional cup games.
I'll leave it there for now. I'm sure I'll come back with a few other questions later. I'll move on to Assembly Member Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. It's a shame that they're not here this afternoon, West Ham. There's an empty seat there. I think that's something they'll get used to quite a lot this season, which obviously is not great for anybody. But the arguments over the terms of the deal are, I think, fairly well rehearsed, and you know, you said in your opening remarks that, you know, a good contract for West Ham. But what would have happened to the stadium if a deal hadn't been done with West Ham? What would it be used for, and what financial implications would that have had? So, and would no deal have been better than a bad deal?
No, it wouldn't, actually, because you know, what we've got here is a tremendous asset for London. If we just put the revenue losses to one side for a moment, this is probably one of, if not the most successful multi-use venues following an Olympic Games in the whole of the world, and certainly in modern times. Premier League football, Major League Baseball, concerts through the summer, other events, be they charity pitch events, be they things like monster trucks, which is a bit unusual, having huge trucks running all over the pitch. But, you know, we've hosted all sorts of things. And athletics, of course, and we've just seen a fabulous world record at the weekend. How superb is that? We hosted the World Athletics in 2017. All of that actually brings a huge economic gain to London, by the way. So Major League Baseball drives around 50 million to London and the surrounding area every time we host Major League Baseball for one weekend. Concerts probably, if we take this summer and we use the usual metrics for calculating economic gain for London, we've just hosted 5 concerts. That's around 300,000 people into that part of London. That would generally derive around £100 million worth of benefits to local businesses, hotels, food and beverage outlets, and so on. And the World Athletics, actually, in 2017, also generated around £100 million for the UK economy. So I think the asset is marvellous. And of course, with football, just thinking about what if there'd been no West Ham. Football brings global eyes to that stadium for a Premier League football club, notwithstanding recent relegation. They'll be back, I'm sure. It brings those global eyes every fortnight. And that's very much worth having, I think. So I think it's a successful outcome, despite the fact that we're faced with some of these legacy issues.
Great. I thought that would be the answer, but I had to ask because I just wanted that kind of reassurance that obviously, even if we think the anchor tenant isn't perhaps paying as much as we'd like them to have done, the fact that they are there underpins the whole kind of credibility and viability of the asset, which then, as you have outlined, has lots of other benefits. And I should just say, I obviously hold no brief for Boris, but perhaps the deal wasn't quite as bad as everyone seems to make out that it was. But there is a kind of narrative blaming Boris for the deal and so on and so forth. I mean, that was 10 years ago. So to what extent can we really blame everything on a mayor who's not been in office for quite some time? And what's being done in the meantime to try and ameliorate those? And I guess one of the things that I think is quite frustrating is to see the very, very slow progress in terms of naming rights. I mean, you said that some commercial deals are better for the rights that we own. Well, the naming rights are the same. That would be a massive one. Why has that not progressed, or why is it taking so long to get anywhere close to progressing that?
This is quite complicated, but I'll have a go at trying to describe it. So the naming rights in this particular contract are split between both parties. Some assets are owned by the club, and other assets are owned by E20, as it used to be known, London Stadium now. So London Stadium is not in a position where it can just go out and sell the naming rights. It also has to be mindful, of course, of the club's IP. So I mentioned the global eyes. There's a price to that IP that the club own and will always own, and therefore they have the right to sign off any naming rights deal. There were a couple of deals before I came to LLDC, i.e. before 2018, that were on the table with major companies that did not proceed for various reasons. And I was sitting here in 2024 giving confidence to the Budget and Performance Committee that we would sign a deal. We had a major sponsor at the table, but at the end, we could not get the club over the line to sign that deal. Part of it was to do with the amount of money changing hands for the IP of the club, but it would have been a fantastic partner for us. It was the closest we've ever come. And so, really speaking, we have to be very joined up in order to do that deal. I've been asked many times in the past why I don't just give the naming rights to the football club for them to sell. That would be fine if there was a transparency in the deal and we could get a good deal for the public sector and be reassured of that. But there's never been a good proposal on the table to enable us to do it. Where we are right now is the club have reached out, actually, and want to work with us under the new leadership in a joint deal, which we very much welcome, and we're talking to them now. It's probably not the right time to sell the naming rights when we're in the Championship. We need to get back into the Premier League. But there are lots of preparatory things that we can do to present a united front in terms of putting the naming rights to the market. Because one of the reasons the deal didn't work in 2024 was because we were not a united front. And any partner coming to the table wants a clean, easy deal where they have a single point of contact and they can get on and with commercial opportunity.
Naming rights have been very successful with other clubs, Arsenal, Brentford, Man City, Everton, and even in the case of my own little club, Colchester, our previous stadium sponsor not anywhere near the figures that would be quoted here, but 200,000 a year, and on the current deal, it basically pays for the rent of the stadium. So clearly something could be very, very useful. Would you say that going forwards, this could be, should be the number one priority to get sorted, to get some more income coming in to both the club, but back to the taxpayer as well?
I don't think it's the number one priority, but I think it's up there with other priorities. I'm a little bit pessimistic because of what's happened in the past and, frankly, the hard bargain that the club has sought to drive in this area that I would like to see some flexibility on, because I think they do have a value, but I don't want to sell those rights for 10 years at an underprice for the taxpayer, so I'm a bit cautious in that space. Nevertheless, it should be up there as a priority to get the deal done. There are other big clubs in the market for naming rights that haven't done deals, Tottenham notably, probably asking too much, if you ask me. But in our position, we do have to share that pot. And sometimes it's best to wait for the right commercial deal and the right partnership rather than simply do a deal that's not giving the taxpayer the best result, I think.
If West Ham's lawyers had been in charge of the team, they wouldn't have got relegated. Who knows?
Interesting that West Ham didn't show a united front with you on this position. But Lynn, and obviously I fully take on board your point. I mean, going down to the Championship isn't a great selling point in relation to naming rights. It isn't the best time to do so. We don't know, of course, when they will come back to the Premier League. What he did say, though, was, and let me just quote here again from Kareem's letter to us. So he has talked about this point and said that there are win-win outcomes, such as naming rights position. Kareem has initiated constructive dialogue on that and other key topics since he joined the club 2 months ago, and he hopes that positive trajectory can continue. But just to give us some context, then, you've been there over this period. How many times has an offer been on the table and been rejected because of West Ham not showing a united front with you?
In my time but during the time I was there, only once in 2024. So we've been in the market for several years prior to 2024, had bits of offers and so on, but nothing that really got to heads of terms. This one was at heads of terms and we couldn't get it over the line, and that was the closest that we came. Prior to me being there, there were two others who I think are in the public domain. They were Vodafone and Mahindra IT, neither of which went forward.
So there's been three on the table so far. Obviously, the major one was the one that you can't refer to in terms of who that was. And presumably you can't tell us what sort of figures we were talking about then, but...
I think the figures were advantageous to us and we would have done the deal, but the ask increased when the football club came to the table and it was just too much, I think, for the partner.
Okay. Assembly Member Polanski.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. So in the letter, the interim CEO says he's doing everything to ensure relegation is only a temporary change. There's a clear goal of securing promotion back to the Premier League at the first time of asking, which is good to hear that that's a football team's intention. Under the agreement, though, if we're looking at the most pessimistic scenario, would there be any further reduction in rent if a club is relegated from the Championship to League One?
No, I don't believe so.
Okay,
no.
So this is kind of a bottomed out. Do you know if there's been any attempt have you had any attempt to renegotiate the agreement? I've realised you've said that the contract is the contract, but how much are they coming to the table?
Are you asking me whether I have attempted to renegotiate the agreement?
Yeah.
No, I haven't.
Okay. Do you know if anyone's attempted to renegotiate the agreement?
I don't think they have. In the organisation that I led prior to chairing the London Stadium Company, which was LLDC, which had the stadium within it for a number of years, interestingly, there was only one member of staff left who now works at London Stadium who was around when that contract was written. And the person who did a lot of the drafting with their lawyers was Baroness Brady. So this was Karen's contract. And I think it was very clear that, you know, the thought of renegotiating any aspect of that contract was never going to be on the table.
Okay, thank you. Finally, you mentioned your previous hat of LLDC. We talked a lot about how the Olympic Park is there to kind of meet the needs of what the mayor's doing in terms of his values. In terms of naming rights, what assurances, I realise the financial is the biggest problem, but also to make sure we don't get a BA Systems Olympic Park or a United Airlines and naming my worst companies here.
Yeah, the way that it works is that there's a filter. So in a sense, it needs to be a three-way agreement. So the mayor needs to be able to sign off that any naming partner that comes to the table is a suitable partner. So in reality, before even getting into a discussion with a partner, there's a lens that we would go through with the mayor's office to make sure that that partner was suitable. And the mayor has a set of guidelines around this that we adhere to.
Good to know. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Assembly Member Armand.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Lynn. You've made it very clear that the contract is as it is. Do you think it should be renegotiated? And if so, what would you like to see in it?
Well, I mean, personally, I'd like to see the whole thing set aside and to start again, but I can't see that happening. The contract's quite, vague in part, and one of the reasons we've had a number of run-ins and been in court with the club is because of interpretation of various clauses and so on. And sometimes the club have won those arguments, and sometimes we have, and sometimes we've settled out of court and so on. But it's been extremely costly going through those processes. And so I'm really hopeful that, and I think it will be the case, that with the new leadership, there will be much less involvement of lawyers. And that's great for both parties because we're not spending money on lawyers. We're spending money on doing the best for the club and for the stadium. I mean, in terms of areas, I made a note of this actually before I came in, just because I was tipped off by the chair that we might have a look at areas where we might amend things. I mean, I guess things like commercial rights and naming rights would be absolutely up there. How can we get ourselves into a position where we jointly approach the market for a partner, regardless of what the contract says? You know, put the contract in your back pocket and do the sensible thing is really what we're talking about. We would really desperately, like the club, like to see women's football played at London Stadium. It's not played at the moment because there's a dispute about how it interacts with the contract and the cost of it. We'd like West Ham to pick up the cost of the women's games. They'd like us to run the games on the same basis as the men's games. So women's football would definitely be up there. I think we'd all love it if we could get a bit of women's football into London Stadium, including the club. And I think that's going to be something that will come out of our discussions. We are extending food and beverage outside the stadium, putting new developments in and so on. We want to do that in partnership with the club. We get some return from food and beverage, and they get hospitality returns. So it's a partnership that is an easy one to pull off. We could do quite a lot around what we call look and feel of the stadium for the fans. You know, there are lots of complaints that London Stadium is not a football stadium, it's an athletic stadium, it doesn't feel like West Ham's ground and so on. There are things we could collaborate on more around making the fans feel more at home at London Stadium. Flexibility on concert windows. Now, I would say this, wouldn't I? But Tottenham are running concerts in September, and so are Wembley. But we can't do that because it's right in the middle of the football season. Is there a way in which we can work with the club so that we could put concerts on during September when it's still really nice weather and we could make a bit of a return on our investment? So they're my kind of top 5 things at the moment. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much. Just on that particular point, I mean, the Spurs Stadium makes significantly more money on concerts and so on. And actually, again, in Kareem's letter, he talks about as if, you know, this is just within your complete ability to be able to do additional sporting events, music concerts, conferences. He's referred to all of these associated commercial opportunities as if you could just put them on. But equally, in his letter, he says that there is the primacy of the football club playing their games every other week at the stadium, which obviously has a significant limitation. We'll come to how that might impact on major events going forward. But in terms of concerts specifically, do you have the window open at the moment, as things currently stand, to get anywhere close to what Wembley or the Spurs Stadium make in terms of concerts and those sorts of major events?
Let's concentrate on Tottenham because Wembley doesn't have football. So if we're kind of comparing the two venues, Tottenham have a longer window than we have for a number of reasons. Well, number one, they don't have athletics, so they don't have to stop concerts and put athletics on and then go to football. They've got the whole of July to play with and the beginning of August. Indeed, for just thinking about that September window, in October, Tottenham signed a 10-year contract with NFL, American football. In October and around the autumn, October, November, they put NFL on, and they asked the Premier League whether they can play away in that window. Our club could do the same if we wanted to make use of the September window for concerts. That's what Tottenham do. They also have two pitches. This fantastic system where they roll out an AstroTurf. So they run all their concerts and their NFL on the AstroTurf. They don't therefore have to have preparation time to make sure that the playing pitch is spot on. And we're winning awards on the pitch at the moment, the quality of the pitch, so that the football club can come out to their first game in August and have a splendid pitch, because they roll it out and keep it under grow lights. At Tottenham because of the stadium that they've built. So they have this much wider window to play with. That's quite important. I'm learning a lot about this, actually, around promoters. So if you think about it, say you're a promoter, a Live Nation, putting a concert on a tour around Europe. You're booking all your dates in for all your major cities and you're looking at London. And you'll come to London Stadium and say, I've got a window here. Can you do 4 days during this window? Well, the likelihood that we can do it is much narrower than for Tottenham. So we've got about, if you say football ends, and it might be a bit later now, we're in the championships, but let's say football ends around, I don't know, the 18th of May. You've then got to convert it for concerts, which means taking a few seats out. Maybe that takes you a week. You've then got about 6 weekends to do all, the whole of June and a bit of July, and then athletics is in, and then football's back. So it's very much shorter window, if that makes sense, in terms of what you can play with. And that's why it's really important to us to have a look at the autumn.
So, Lynn, sorry, just on that particular point, one of the elements that Karim has raised within his letter, he says, we are now in receipt of a new accelerated stadium reconfiguration programme, which sounds very fancy, and will assess its viability during the upcoming athletics to football stadium transition starting next week. What on earth is he talking about, and what could it mean?
Yeah, so I can't remember the date now. 5th of July, I was in the Sunday Metallica concert. 18th of July, we put athletics on. So the concert has to come out. All the seats have to come. Some of the seats have to come back in. The running track has to be cleared and so on. And the pitch sorted out for pitch events for athletics. More importantly is on the way out. So athletics have now left. Football season's upon us in August, and we need to, as quickly as possible, get all the paraphernalia out for athletics. We call it an overlay for athletics. Get all the overlay out, putting all the seats back for football, which come up and cover part of the running track and come right up to the edge of the pitch and so on. And that's quite a large endeavour, make sure that the pitch is fine for football and so on. Generally, it takes about 2 weeks. What he's referring to there in his letter is looking at whether we can shorten that period, because we've asked West Ham United to consider the World Athletics in 2029, and they are proactively at the table, not committed at the moment, but they're looking, one of the things they're looking at is how quickly we can transition out, because it's going to be really important to them if we were to have that athletics event for us to hand it back for football as quickly as possible.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to hold on that point, Assembly Member Lord Bailey.
Thank you, Lynn. It's always interesting to speak to you because you fill in a lot of the blanks in a very technical way, and that's very interesting. I just want to go back before I go to our major question. So listening to you speak, again, focuses on the deal because it isn't like West Ham have been given a pristine football stadium they can just use when and if they please. There's a lot of compromise around actually making it work, athletic stakes, etc., etc. So actually, it puts a deal in a slightly different vein than maybe some people here would like to see it. Please, can you update us on the discussions around hosting the 2029 World Athletic Championships? I'm not a football fan. I'm much more interested in athletics than I am football. So if there was any hangover from the Olympics that was going to be welcome, it would be the fact that we could host big athletics things going on. My other additional question is, where does the National Athletic Stadium Crystal Palace feature in all of this? Because in my little fantasy world, we can't run both. Should we just do it all with you, or should we spend some money on Crystal Palace and put all the athletics there and free you up to deliver with West Ham?
I'll start with Crystal Palace, if I may. I don't know a great deal about it, but I know there's a project underway here at City Hall. My understanding is that's going to produce something like 20-odd thousand seater stadium. Athletics at the weekend and last year, and I think the year before, hosted over 50,000 people. It's become really popular. We worried after the anniversary games because the numbers really fell off, and one year we had something like 20-odd thousand people outside of the COVID years, which was really worrying. But it's now really stepped back up. It's become really popular. It was obviously fabulous at the weekend in terms of what was achieved. But what happens is that UK athletics have sponsors who expect to see those kinds of crowds at a London venue, and in return they sponsor UK athletics for a long period of time. So they used to have a Nike contract, for example. I think it still is their main sponsor, and they signed that for 10 years. And so the venue and the crowd is really important to the sponsor. Switching to somewhere like Crystal Palace probably wouldn't work at the moment simply because of the capacity of that venue. But it still would be London, obviously. So that's my understanding there. We are in a 50-year contract with UKA that started at the same time, about 2016, when the stadium started to come into use after transformation. Turning to the World Athletics then, I think it's a fantastic opportunity for London. And we have all the facilities in London. We can easily run this within the park. We've done it before, brought a huge economic benefit. If it brought over 100 million in 2017, what would that number be now in 2026? It would be a huge economic benefit for all the businesses in London. If it flows back to the government, essentially, in taxes, not to City Hall, unfortunately, but the economic benefit for London and the global eyes would be really significant. And I think West Ham could get behind that in a really positive way. On the other hand, for whatever reason, I can't pretend I know the answer to this, athletics want to hold the event in September, as opposed to, say, the end of July in the summer. And that makes it really difficult for the football club, I think. It's in the middle of their season. They do have what we call an overriding priority principle within the contract, which is absolutely correct. It's correct that the football club have the use of the stadium through the whole period for football. And so we cannot do it unless we have the football club's explicit agreement, and they would need to work with governing bodies and so on if they were minded in that direction. What I will say is we're having very positive conversations with the new leadership, who are being open-minded. They are looking at the transition time, as Karim has said in his letter, but they have not made a decision yet. And it's a matter that's a live discussion at the moment.
So they're season's timings is really what's dictating their behaviour here. That they have to be able to play at that particular time.
Yes.
And does that gives them a veto power over any activity you could potentially put in instead of a game?
That's right. They have a veto power, absolutely, and that's quite proper. That's why we don't have concerts in September as well, because we would need their permission. And we'd need to demonstrate that we were not going to damage the pitch, for example, to put concerts on. But for athletics, the good thing is that it's in the international window. However, it's probably going to affect 2, maybe 3 games, which might mean that if they were drawn at home, ordinarily, they would have to ask to play away. And I think that's a big deal for the football club and a big deal for the fans. And so they want to consider that in the round and take their time to make the right decision.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, the point you made earlier, though, was, so, for example, Spurs own their stadium and they make the decision it's in their financial interests, as well as, I guess, wider interests, to host those events during September when they're not playing at home, or to make some minor changes to playing away for a couple of weekends in a row, for example. Kareem has set out that final approval has to be by the Premier League. Obviously, not in this case because it will be the EFL, and so on, and referred to UEFA. Clearly, not on the cards anytime soon, unfortunately for them. If West Ham own the stadium, do you think they'd be making different decisions?
I don't know. I don't know. If West Ham owned the stadium, it would be a completely different story. I would like to think that if they owned the stadium, it would still be a multi-use venue and not just football, because it was built for that purpose. And I think we would, if they owned the stadium, we would certainly encourage that. But I couldn't be drawn on whether they would be willing to host the athletics. It's not, unlike NFL, it wouldn't bring them a financial return.
So for the World Athletic Championships, at the moment, I think the next one's in China. It's, as you said, in September. So it lasts about a week and a half in terms of the totality of the actual competition. But obviously, you've got to have either side to get the stadium ready and return it back for use as a football stadium. So we're essentially talking about 2 to 3 weeks in totality as things currently stand. In terms of the negotiation, Kareem has said that West Ham are at the table in terms of having those conversations, but presumably because you're saying that they, unlike NFL, they don't get a financial return on that, is effectively what they're doing by having these conversations, by having that veto power, looking to effectively get commission, get a financial incentive from having World Athletics Championships at the London Stadium.
No, I don't think they are. I think they're being supportive and constructive and wanting to support the athletics, but they are concerned about their fan base. And it might be that the conversation is more around, if it was to go ahead, around what improvements could be brought forward to help the fans accept that they might play a game or two away from the stadium. And all of that depends on how things are drawn and so on. And as he says, in any case, it would be in the hands of the governing authorities at the end of the day would need to put their stamp of approval on it. But I'm sure that could be arranged if everybody was behind the event. Yeah.
So one of the things that comes up time and time again in terms of when I post about this on social media is West Ham fans, I think, are pretty united on the fact that they don't particularly like playing at the stadium. They love their old ground, the Upton Park, and don't appreciate actually having to play there at the moment. So where are we looking to land it in terms of if I was a West Ham fan talking to you now, what would you be saying to them about what this stadium could be looking like in a season or two's time?
Well, I think, as I said earlier, there could be some improvements for how the place looks and feels for West Ham fans. I think probably it feels a bit sterile. It doesn't feel like their home. So I think there could be some improvements in terms of how, the thing looks and feels inside. So, for example, one of the things we've considered inside the bowl is turning all the seats claret, West Ham coloured. It's an easy thing for us to do. It doesn't affect our concerts or MLB or anything else, but it's very costly. And it would take a long time to do that if we were just doing it on a maintenance schedule, for example. But it would feel more intimate and more West Ham-like if the seats were claret as opposed to white, perhaps. You know, it's just an idea. So we're discussing a number of things, actually, around that. In a couple of years, I'd like to think that we take our eyes off football a little bit and have a look at the real estate around the stadium and what other opportunities there are to make some commercial gains to bring down the pressure for the taxpayer. So one of those is development outside on the island in terms of more food and beverage developments, and we've got plans coming forward at the moment. Another is looking at development round the back of the stadium in terms of potentially another leisure anchor where we've got a little bit of land we could exploit. And thirdly, we're also, notwithstanding the barriers to the weekends that we have in the summer, we're looking with Newham at licensing to see if we can put more events on. So the licenses at the moment are restricted to 10. If we compare that to Tottenham, they can run 50 events a year outside football, which is huge compared to our licensing agreement in Newham, which is 10 events. So we'd like to have a look at whether we can extend that through the summer as far as we possibly can and put some more events on. They're the kinds of improvements that we're looking at commercially at the minute.
And if only the GLA was getting more licensing powers, I guess, on that front as well. Couple of very quick final questions from myself. So we talked about maybe if West Ham had a different approach if they own the stadium. Have they approached you about owning the stadium?
No.
And are they could, I mean, obviously they wouldn't because the terms are so financially beneficial to them, but they could walk away from this contract at any point as well, could they not?
Yes.
Yeah, okay. And there would be no financial recompense to us if they did so?
I don't know. I'd need to. I don't know the answer to that. Sorry.
Okay.
Need to look at that.
Great. Thank you very much, Lynn, for your time this afternoon. I think we could carry on and forever be blowing bubbles. But we've now reached the end of this session. I'd like to thank our guests for attending. We also did have, obviously, as we've referred to a few times, a letter from the interim CEO at West Ham United. And, of course, we had also invited the former mayor and the other signatory of this contract, Boris Johnson. We did offer him any time that it was available, but didn't seem to be available at all. He did send us a couple of lines, which, as you can imagine, he felt it was the best contract that was ever signed, and so on and so forth. But we've got a couple of more items of business to deal with, and thank you, Lynn, very much for your time. I just ask you to stay whilst we carry on through those very, very quickly. Won't take very long. So can I ask the committee to note the report and the discussion? Can we also delegate authority to myself as chair with group lead members to agree any output? Thank you. Can I ask the committee to note its work programme? The next meeting of the committee will be held on the 9th of September, 2 p.m. in the chamber again at City Hall. And I have no urgent business, which concludes today's meeting. Thank you very much.